Chapter 321, Immeasurable Peak. The Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competition is finally going to begin. Early in the morning on the day the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competition was to start, from within a sealed cave in a remote mountainous area of Immeasurable Mountain, there came a low murmur. Then, with a boom, the ceiling array outside the cave shattered into pieces, and a young man with long black hair strode out. After coming out of the cave, the young man in black gazed toward the direction of the highest peak of Immeasurable Mountain. Then he lowered his head to look at the palm of his right hand. The moment he lowered his head, a vibrant blue sword light suddenly appeared in the palm of his hand, which had been empty before. As the blue sword light appeared, all the true chi of heaven and earth within hundreds of yards around where the young man stood started to pulsate wildly. Eventually, even the mighty trees withered instantaneously, but the blue sword light in the youth's hand became even more intense. 3 years and 5 months. Finally, I.M.O. Biling have touched upon a level that transcends the sword intent and have cultivated the Law Sword Seed. With the Law Sword Seed, once I break through to the rotating pill realm, I will be able to fuse the 5 great void heaven laws into my Law Sword Seed and cultivate my very own Law Sword domain. Sword intent, Law Sword Seed, Law Sword domain, these 3 layers of the sword path, can only cultivate the first 2 layers before stepping into the rotating pill realm. Yet among the countless Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators, not many have comprehended the Law Sword Seed. While still in the Spirit Sea Realm, the majority are still cultivating their sword intent and the sword formations within it. Last time, I lost to Fong Luohan because I was defeated by a high-level sword formation, but this time, having comprehended the Law Sword Seed, I will definitely be able to defeat him when we meet again. In the many years of competition among the Spirit Sea Sword cultivators, it's been many years since someone has comprehended the Law Sword Seed. This time, I will definitely claim the championship at the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competition and avenge my previous defeat by Fong Luohan. After murmuring to himself, the young man in black grabbed with his right hand, and the vibrant blue sword light disappeared into the center of his palm. Then, with a move of his body, he shot towards the highest peak of Immeasurable Mountain. From the self-murmuring of the young man in black, it could be heard that he was none other than M.O. Biling, the favorite to win the championship among those listed in the sword-fighting spirit ranking, who came from the 3rd grade sword sect, Nan Tsong sword sect, of the Great Zhou dynasty. After being defeated by Fong Luohan, a disciple of another 3rd grade sword sect, M.O. Biling secluded himself to comprehend sword intent. No one would have imagined that he would comprehend a higher level of the sword path that transcended sword intent, the Law Sword Seed. In the west of Great Yu City, atop a vast building, 2 young men holding treasured swords stood facing each other. They weren't circulating any techniques, but the overwhelming sword intent was involuntarily bursting out from within them. These 2 youths, one wielding an extremely thin narrow sword and the other a thick, heavy black sword. Like their swords, one of the men was thin while the other was robust and brawny. The robust youth spoke to the thin one, Lu Xiaojia, senior brother. You haven't accepted my challenge for years. At this sword fighting competition you will have to fight me, right? Rumor has it that you've cultivated a high-level sword formation, and that you possess 18 kinds, with some reaching the high grade of the heavenly tier. I really want to see how powerful your high-level sword formation is. The thin youth glanced at the brawny one, smiled non-committally, and said, Luohan, junior brother, my opponent this time isn't you, but a young man whose reputation has skyrocketed in the past few days. A young man whose reputation has skyrocketed? The brawny youth was startled, then instantly realized, are you talking about Yi Chun, who recently joined the Heavenly Sacred Palace, senior brother Lu Xiaojia? The thin youth nodded but did not say anything more. Instead, he started flying into the air. Let's go. The sword fighting competition is about to begin. We have to head to Immeasurable Peak now. After the thin youth took off, the robust one also rose into the air, following the figure ahead towards the highest peak of Immeasurable Mountain, Immeasurable Peak. Those who recognized them would surely know. This thin youth was none other than Lu Xiaojia, who was previously the top favorite to win the championship according to the sword-fighting spirit ranking. from the third-grade sword sect, Tian Kuan's sword sect, of the great Xia dynasty. And the robust youth facing him was none other than Fong Luohan, the one who had defeated Mo Bailing, from the third-grade sword sect, Bei Tsong's sword sect, of the great Zhou dynasty. Immeasurable Peak, the highest peak in the Immeasurable Mountain region. It is also where the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competition has been held for many years. As Mo Bailing, Lu Xiaojia, Fong Luohan, and other favorites to win the championship flew towards Immeasurable Peak. The entire mountainside of Immeasurable Peak was already densely packed with people. Not only at the mountainside but even in the void surrounding the peak. One could see Spirit Sea rotating pill martial artists everywhere. The Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament was about to begin, with many people already arriving early at this mountain peak. At this time, tens of thousands had gathered around Immeasurable Peak. Among them, there were those who were to participate in the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament, and even more were sword cultivators who had come to watch this millennial event. Many others were waiting for the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament to end so they could take part in another competition, Hidden Dragon Ranking, for the strong contenders of the rotating pill realm. Several heavenly saints had even arrived early, sitting cross-legged in the void high above. At this moment, within the countless crowds, a girl dressed in light purple clothing, Lu Qingmei, was looking in the direction of Great Yu City. In these 3 days, Yichun and Sister Jiang Yao still need to intensify their cultivation. The sword fighting tournament is about to start, and they haven't arrived yet. So talented. Yet they still cultivate so diligently. No wonder they're so powerful. Lu Qingmei smiled gently. Sister Jiang Yao kept asking me why I would stand up to help her. Perhaps after the sword fighting tournament officially starts, she might be able to see the reason. They're close to invincible below the heavenly saints in terms of comprehensive strength. But this Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament is only a contest of swordsmanship. I hope they won't disappoint me this time in their swordsmanship achievements. Lu Qingmei murmured to herself, while in her storage ring, a snow-white treasured sword also hummed softly. Lu Xiaojia, Fong Luohan, Mo Bailing, Lu Qingmei, one by one, the hot favorites from the sword-fighting spirit ranking had all gathered in Immeasurable Peak. And as warriors from the southern lands, the western desolate Polar Star Archipelago, and the warriors from the extreme north arrived one after another, Immeasurable Peak became increasingly bustling. When sects from the central region, those ranked 4th and 5th, particularly the immensely powerful third-ranked sects arrived, Immeasurable Peak was completely lively. Everyone was waiting for the half-hour to pass, and for the Spirit Sea Realm sword-fighting tournament to begin, anticipating the arrival of the strong contenders who would host the tournament and the people from Heavenly Sacred Palace. At this time, in an inn in Great Yu City, Mu Qingqing and Jiang Yao were both waiting outside a room in the inn. Sister Jiang Yao, you have completed your cultivation. Why hasn't Yichun come out yet? The sword-fighting tournament is about to start. Mu Qingqing said to Jiang Yao anxiously. Jiang Yao smiled gently. Don't worry. Yichun sent a message the day before yesterday saying he would come out on time. In the past 2 days, he seemed to have entered a wonderful state of enlightenment. A wonderful state of enlightenment? Mu Qingqing's eyes lit up. Yichen's already so powerful and he's still enlightening. Could it be that in these short 2 or 3 days of cultivation, he could have a great breakthrough? I don't know. Jiang Yao shook her head with a smile. All I know is that even though you scared away that Yudo Heavenly Saint, Yichun and I are somewhat discontented. We don't want to be oppressed by the Heavenly Saints forever, so we're also eagerly cultivating these days. Maybe those few confrontations in the square with the people from Western Desolate gave Yichun some enlightenment. As Mu Qingqing and Jiang Yao conversed softly, the door of the room behind them creaked open. Has Yichun finished cultivating? Hearing the sound of the door opening behind her, both Jiang Yao and Mu Qingqing were overjoyed and turned around to look. To their surprise, they saw the door wide open. Inside, Yichun was smiling faintly at them. Yichun. Seeing that Yichun really had finished his cultivation, Jiang Yao ran towards Yichun happily. Mu Qingqing also pursed her rosy lips and said with a soft laugh to Yichun, I thought you wouldn't come out and we're going to miss the sword fighting tournament. The sword fighting tournament? I can't miss that. Yi Chen smiled, looking up towards the immeasurable mountain range outside Great Yu City, towards the highest peak of Immeasurable Mountain, barely visible in the distance. Let's go. I've just completed my cultivation. Yet I inexplicably feel that this sword-fighting tournament might just bring some surprising accidents that'll be quite a delight. Chapter 322 Void Heaven Sword Valley. When Yi Chen arrived at Immeasurable Peak with Zhang Yao and Mu Qingqing, there were already over 100,000 people gathered around. 100,000 people. Even though Immeasurable Peak towered several thousand feet high, a huge mountain spanning the earth and piercing the sky, the mountain peak and the space around it were densely packed with figures. Among these figures, there were over 70,000 martial artists at the Spirit Sea realm alone, and even more 40 to 50,000 at the Rotating Pill realm. There were even over 30 heavenly saints present. Just one glance at the number of powerful figures gathered was astonishing, not to mention the suffocating aura emanated by each of them. Even Yi Chen and Zhang Yao couldn't help marveling at the sight of so many powerful figures converging around Immeasurable Peak. The Millennium Gathering. Indeed, it was the Millennium Gathering. The two grand events organized by the Heavenly Sacred Palace had drawn countless martial artists from the Central Domain, the Southern Territory, the Western Wilderness, the outer islands of the Eastern Star region, and the Northern Ice Palace's snowy plains, truly deserving of the title Monstrous Gathering. Countless martial artists might not witness such a grand gathering in their lifetimes, let alone participate in it. Being able to come to Immeasurable Mountain and witness such a grand occasion firsthand, even if many didn't participate or didn't achieve good results, it would still be worth treasuring immensely. Yi Chen and Zhang Yao watched the teeming figures all around the mountain, listened to the roiling clamor, and thought of the two grand events that were about to take place. A feeling of excitement stirring within them at the thought of truly matching skills with countless martial artists. After taking a deep breath, the two flew up with Mu Qingqing, heading towards the expanse of space above Immeasurable Peak. As Yi Chen, Zhang Yao, and Mu Qingqing flew toward the airspace above Immeasurable Mountain, they attracted a lot of attention. When people began to recognize their identities, even more eyes gathered upon the trio. At that moment, Yi Chen was dressed in light blue robes, his figure tall and lean, hair cascading down his back, brows like swords and eyes like stars. But it was the transcendent confidence and grace he carried that made countless young female martial artists below scream in admiration. Mu Qingqing and Zhang Yao, who were accompanying Yi Chen, also attracted numerous gazes. Mu Qingqing, wearing a suit of tight emerald garments, accentuated her straight legs, making them appear even more well-rounded and shapely. Looking upward, one could see her slender, sexy waist, her full and enticing bosom, and her swan-like, elegant snow-white neck. Especially those charming and cunning eyes set in her exquisitely beautiful face. They made it hard for one to look away. Mu Qingqing was already a girl of astonishing beauty, but when many eyes drifted to Zhang Yao in her white dress next to Mu Qingqing, a gasp of astonishment rose from deep within them. Zhang Yao did not possess the coquettish allure of Mu Qingqing, but her ethereal, tranquil elegance was even more captivating. Not even Mu Qingqing could compare to Zhang Yao's visage. In her presence, she seemed to pale somewhat. Her exquisitely delicate face was free of blemish, skin like snow, a noble nose, rosy lips, and cheeks adorned with faint dimples, all emanating breathtaking beauty. Especially her faint brows, long eyelashes, and those starry, brightly sparkling eyes were mesmerizing. Seeing Mu Qingqing and then Zhang Yao, and then Yi Chen beside the two stunning girls, many people felt immense envy for Yi Chen. Having one such beautiful girl by one side was already the envy of many. Two of such beauty, especially the most beautiful Zhang Yao, who held Yi Chen's hand, made countless young martial artists unable to hide their jealousy. When Lu Qingmei noticed Yi Chen's group arriving and flew toward Yi Chen, seeing a third beautiful girl joining Yi Chen's side made many young martial artists howl with envy in their hearts. It's so unjust. While Yi Chen was unaware of these young martial artists' thoughts, he looked towards the approaching Lu Qingmei with a smile and greeted her. Yi Chen, you're here. Once the four of them entered the airspace above Immeasurable Mountain, even more people flocked toward Yi Chen. Among these were martial artists from the Southern Territory, those newly acquainted with Yichun from the Central Domain, and even many from the Taiye sword sect, a third-rank sword sect, were approaching Yichun. In no time, a large crowd had gathered around Yichun. Witnessing the bustling scene around Yichun's group, in a corner of the void, in the area where the martial artists from the 10 great demon sects of the Western Wilderness were gathered, many were wrestling with complicated feelings. Their eyes betrayed a mix of jealousy and fear as they looked at Yichun. These people were the same group that Yichun had dominated earlier in the plaza, including Bai Wuchen, the strongest participant from the Western Wilderness on this occasion. On the plaza, Yichun had single-handedly suppressed over 100 of them with just his individual power. Even Bai Wuchen, with 2 other powerful combatants, had been repelled by Yichun. In the end, even the arrival of a heavenly saint didn't work in their favor, making the Western Wilderness representatives feel extremely frustrated. What they feared even more was Yichun's potential. Being so formidable in the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm, it was daunting to imagine how powerful Yichun would become once he stepped into the rotating pill or heavenly saint realm. By that time, the Western Wilderness might no longer have the courage to provoke the Southern Territory. Disciples from the Western Wilderness were consumed with complex emotions, and among the void of immeasurable peak, numerous figures watched Yichun with eyes gleaming brightly.
Yichun.
So this is the youth. In the crowd, the lean Lu Xiaojia caressed the sword in his hand, a fighting spirit igniting in his eyes. I heard that at the square, he alone overpowered more than 100 from the Western Wilderness, and even consecutively executed several immensely powerful high-level sword formations. This time, at the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference, he could very likely be my greatest opponent. I, Lu Xiaojia, have never met my match among the Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators of the 4 major third-rank sword sects. This time, I want to see if this Yichun's swordsmanship is stronger than mine. While the fighting spirit blazed in Lu Xiaojia's eyes, on the other side of the crowd, the solitary Mo Biling also fixed her gaze on Yichun. Is this the youth Yichun that I've been hearing about incessantly since coming to Immeasurable Mountain? To be able to overpower an end-stage rotating pill powerhouse while only in the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm, this in itself is far superior to me. But in the sword fighting conference of the Spirit Sea realm, it's all about sword technique, and I believe that in swordsmanship, he definitely can't beat me. As Mo Biling spoke, the green sword light in her tightly clenched right fist flickered wildly. However, she suppressed the outward force of this green sword light, and no one noticed her abnormality. Not even the other sword cultivators beside her sensed the slightest fluctuation. While Yichun conversed with several martial artists, and as countless martial artists took notice of Yichun, wanting to spar with him, and even more martial artists were making final preparations for the start of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference, the moment for the official start of the event finally arrived. Boom! The appointed moment marking the start of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference came, and everyone took notice as the summit of Immeasurable Peak suddenly thundered with the sound of surging air waves. Amidst the roar of the air waves, the void canvas was torn apart, and a dozen figures emerged from the summit of Immeasurable Mountain. Leading these dozen figures was none other than the Vice Hall Master of the First Sacred Hall of Heavenly Sacred Palace and the Supreme Elder of Taiye Sword Sect, Xiao Jiukong. Alongside Elder Xiao, Supreme Elder, stood 3 mid-stage Heavenly Saint Realm powerhouses, who, by the look of their vestments, were unmistakably from Heavenly Sacred Palace. Yichun, Sister Zhang Yao. The other 3 beside Elder Xiao are the 3 great Heavenly Saints from Heavenly Saint Mountain who have come to participate and preside over the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference and the Hidden Dragon Ranking Competition. Mu Qingqing introduced these 3 great Heavenly Saints to Yichun and Zhang Yao. Accompanying Elder Xiao, Supreme Elder, and the 3 great Heavenly Saints from Heavenly Sacred Palace were also 4 early-stage Heavenly Saints. Yichun recognized only one of the 4, who was from the Taiye Sword Sect, the 9 Swords Heavenly Saint. However, through the words of the martial artists beside him, Yichun learned that the other 3 were from the other 3 third-rank sword sects in the Central Region. All 4 major third-rank sword sects of the Central Region had sent Heavenly Saints to this place. Behind the 8 great heavenly saints were the 9 rotating pill masters presiding over this Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting conference, among whom were the Snow Jade of the Immeasurable Sword Sect from the Central Region, the Wine Sword Immortal that Yi-Chun was quite familiar with from the Southern Territory, the Dried Mountain Taoist from the Western Wilderness, the Skybrow Taoist from the Eastern Starbound Archipelago, and so on. However, with the participation of Heavenly Sacred Palace and the 4 major third-rank sword sects in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference, the 9 rotating pill masters presiding were now not drawing as much attention. Almost all eyes were drawn to the Heavenly Saints, especially fixed upon Elder Shao Supreme Elder standing at the forefront. Amidst the countless gazes, Elder Shao Supreme Elder looked at the people, and when his eyes landed on Yi-Chun, Zhang Yao, and Mu Qingqing, his gaze paused for a moment, revealing a faint smile. After Elder Shao Supreme Elder glanced around at everyone, he finally nodded and gently said towards Snow Jade among the 9 rotating pill masters presiding over the event, "Snow Jade, you preside over this sword fighting conference." Elder Shao Supreme Elder's voice was soft, yet it reached the ears of every martial artist. In an instant, all around Immeasurable Peak, the martial artists burst into excitement. Snow Jade presiding over the conference. The sword fighting conference was finally about to begin. Amidst numerous excited gazes and the low yet irrepressible chatter, Snow Jade paid his respects to Elder Shao Supreme Elder with a bow and took the lead, responding to the call. He addressed the countless martial artists in the void and on the mountain peaks, proclaiming, "The sword fighting conference this time marks the first participation of the 4 major third-rank sword sects in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference after 2,343 years. Usually, the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Conference takes place in the void at the summit of Immeasurable Peak. This time, the event will return to the location where it was held over 2,000 years ago, the Void Heaven Sword Valley of Immeasurable Peak." Chapter 323, Opening of Sword Valley. Reopening Void Heaven Sword Valley? Many rotating Pill Realm and Heavenly Saints in the venue, as well as the Spirit Sea Realm martial artists who knew about the events of Void Heaven Sword Valley from thousands of years ago, were all deeply shocked. Void Heaven Sword Valley is rumored to be the most mysterious place in Immeasurable Mountain. It was because of the discovery of this Void Heaven Sword Valley that the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament was held here. It is said that there are countless sword pits in the Void Heaven Sword Valley. As long as one can enter the valley, they can induce the sword pits to emit Void Heaven Sword Chi. This Void Heaven Sword Chi is rumored to be an extremely powerful kind of innate sword chi. Not only can it nourish sword intents, but it can also be integrated into the Chi Si to elevate true Chi cultivation level. And it's even beneficial for eventually understanding the 5 great heavenly void laws. It can be said that this Void Heaven Sword Valley is the most precious secret ground for Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators. It offers tremendous benefits to Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators. Back then, many champions of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament gained incredible benefits in the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Unfortunately, as the Void Heaven Sword Chi inside the sword pits was exhausted, and the 4 third-grade sword sects withdrew from the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament, Void Heaven Sword Valley has been sealed for a long time. Now, after thousands of years, Void Heaven Sword Valley is being reopened. I'm afraid the Void Heaven Sword Chi inside will be incredibly dense. Those who participate in the sword fighting tournament this time will surely reap great rewards, especially the victor. Countless people who knew of Void Heaven Sword Valley couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Even many at the rotating Pill Realm couldn't help but sigh. What a pity that Void Heaven Sword Valley is rumored to be accessible only to Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators. I've already stepped into the rotating Pill Realm and can no longer enter it. Otherwise, it would be wonderful to enter the Void Heaven Sword Valley and experience the Void Heaven Sword Chi related to the 5 great heavenly void laws. Those who knew about Void Heaven Sword Valley were discussing it heatedly, while those who did not became even more curious about it after hearing the many rumors. Void Heaven Sword Valley? Yi-Chun and Zhang Yao exchanged glances. Like those who were unaware of Void Heaven Sword Valley, they showed a hint of bewilderment. They had never heard of Void Heaven Sword Valley and did not know that such a place existed within Immeasurable Mountain. Mu Qingqing, who was beside them, also seemed a bit stunned. I've never mentioned this place either, and even Elder Shao never told me about it. It seems this sword fighting tournament is going to be very interesting. While everyone was either discussing or curious, Snow Jade, the person presiding over the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament, continued saying, "Many people may not have heard of Void Heaven Sword Valley, so I will inform you about it. Void Heaven Sword Valley is a strange spatial realm located behind the peak of Immeasurable Mountain, only accessible to Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators who have mastered sword intents. Moreover, once inside, any cultivation technique unrelated to swordsmanship, even true chi, cannot be used. Only sword chi, sword intents, and other sword techniques can be utilized. Upon entering, every sword cultivator will induce the sword chi from countless sword pits within the valley to erupt. Eventually, each sword cultivator will condense a Su Tian sword chi light group around them. After many years of research on Void Heaven Sword Valley, we have discovered that the more exceptional the talent of the sword cultivator, the more Void Heaven Sword Chi they will induce, and the larger the Su Tian Sword Chi light group they will form. These Su Tian Sword Chi light groups initially just envelop the sword cultivator's body and cannot even be utilized. All the sword cultivators who enter the Void Heaven Sword Valley to participate in the sword fighting tournament have 3 days, during which they can engage in sword fighting to seize the sword chi light groups from others. The loser will only retain half of the Void Heaven Sword Chi light group they initially condensed, whereas the victor will take away the other half of the sword chi light group from their body, as well as all the sword chi light groups they have won from others. At the same time, once a sword cultivator suffers defeat, they will completely lose the opportunity to fight again in the sword fighting tournament and will be directly transported to a sword river area within the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Once the 3-day period is over, all the sword cultivators in the Void Heaven Sword Valley, regardless of victory or defeat, can begin to refine the Void Heaven Sword Chi light spheres that remain on their bodies. The duration of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament is 3 days. In these 3 days, the more powerful the sword cultivator, the more sword chi light spheres they can seize, and after the tournament concludes, the more Void Heaven Sword Chi they will be able to refine. Even when one captures a certain amount of Void Heaven Sword Chi, it can trigger a magnificent benediction from the Void Heaven Sword Valley, causing a surge of Void Heaven Sword Chi once again to envelop them, providing a second opportunity to undergo sword chi condensation. At this point, Snow Jade turned her gaze towards many of the Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators in the arena. The opportunity to participate in the sword fighting tournament in the Void Heaven Sword Valley is extremely precious, especially since this time, after more than 2,000 years, the Void Heaven Sword Valley has been reopened, and the Void Heaven Sword Chi within it is even more potent than ever before. All sword cultivators who wish to compete in the sword fighting tournament, unleash your strongest power to trigger the surge of sword chi and seize the Void Heaven Sword Chi. This Void Heaven Sword Chi differs from the true chi that you cultivate. Cultivating true chi requires daily meditation and training, and there is also a daily limit to the true chi that can be absorbed in one sitting. But this Void Heaven Sword Chi is extraordinarily peculiar. Once you have gathered the Void Heaven Sword Chi light spheres, in the end, all of it can even be transformed into true chi and enter your bodies, helping you to elevate your cultivation levels. During the sword fighting tournaments over 2,000 years ago, many late Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators who won the tournaments were even able to condense unparalleled Void Heaven Sword Chi in the Void Heaven Sword Valley, attracting the descent of the 5 great Void Heaven laws and directly stepping into the rotating pill realm. I hope you all can also achieve great gains within. Snow Jade's words ignited a blazing fire in the eyes of the Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators who were about to join the sword fighting tournament. By entering the Void Heaven Sword Valley, one can directly attract Void Heaven Sword Chi to themselves. The more exceptional the sword cultivator, the more Void Heaven Sword Chi they can attract. Through sword fighting, one can also seize Void Heaven Sword Chi from others. Even in defeat, one can retain half of one's own Void Heaven Sword Chi. If there's sufficient Void Heaven Sword Chi, one might even have a second chance for sword chi condensation, or even directly use the Void Heaven Sword Chi to assault the boundaries of the rotating pill realm. Whether victorious or not, there will be gains, and obviously, victory brings greater rewards, naturally exciting countless Spirit Sea Realm Sword cultivators to an immense degree. Void Heaven Sword Chi can directly fuse into the body and transform into true Chi. Yichun was also extremely exhilarated at this moment. He had been at the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea Realm for some time now, and even though he had top-quality Spirit Stones, there was a limit to the amount of true Chi he could absorb into the Chi Sea each day. If this Void Heaven Sword Chi could indeed be completely transformed into true Chi and fully integrated into his body, then as long as he accumulated enough Void Heaven Sword Chi, he might be able to directly assault the later stages of the Spirit Sea Realm. The true Chi within Yichun was extraordinarily unique. It was the primordial true Chi, and the quantity of true Chi he required far exceeded that of a typical Spirit Sea Realm martial artist. If he could use Void Heaven Sword Chi to swiftly elevate his true Chi, that would indeed save him a considerable amount of cultivation time. Even more so, if he could break through to the late stage of the Spirit Sea Realm, the power of the 5 great divine bloods he could harness would be greater, even possibly enabling him to call upon the full might of the divine bloods, allowing the divine blood to drop into the Chi Sea spiritual liquid and step into the 3rd chapter of the primordial star scripture. This, of course, filled Yichun with anticipation. Yichun was impatient to enter the Void Heaven Sword Valley to see just how much Void Heaven Sword Chi he could gather, how much he could seize, and ultimately how much it could assist in his advancement of the true Chi realm. As Yichun eagerly anticipated, and while countless Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators had fiery looks in their eyes, Snow Jade finally announced, "Now, the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament officially begins. First, please invite the seniors from the 4 great 3rd-rank sword sects to open the Void Heaven Sword Valley." After Snow Jade finished speaking, she gestured respectfully to the 4 heavenly saints from the 4 great 3rd-rank sword sects, and the 9 swords heavenly saint among the 4 grand heavenly saints stepped forward. At this moment, countless martial artists were intently watching these 4 great heavenly saints, curious about how they would open the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Yichun, Jiang Yao, Mu Qingqing, and Lu Qingmei's eyes were also fixed on the 4 heavenly saints. The 4 heavenly saints stepped forward, and all their gazes were directed towards a void behind the summit of immeasurable mountain. Then, with a spell formed in each of their hands, they cast it towards that void. Wave after wave of strange light surged forth from that void. This surging light caused the martial artists nearby to unconsciously step back, leaving a vast space several hundred feet in diameter. Next, within this vast space, boom, 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 4 gigantic treasured swords rose up. These 4 gigantic treasured swords, each 100 meters in length and standing in the 4 cardinal directions, seemed to anchor the vast space in place. Each sword blade was inscribed with countless mystical runes, patterns, and arrays, appearing incredibly divine and marvelous. Just as the 4 gigantic swords appeared, the 9 swords heavenly saint and the other 3 held treasured swords in their hands, and while these swords were not as huge as the 400-meter ones, the inscribed runes, patterns, and arrays on them were exactly the same as those on the gigantic swords. As soon as the 4 from the 9 swords heavenly saint pointed their swords towards the 4 giant ones, a rumbling sound came, and the swords that held the several hundred feet space aloft took flight, shrinking and flying towards the 4 great heavenly saints. As the 4 giant swords shrank and flew back, all the martial artists standing in the void and around a measurable mountain heard waves of strange sword cries coming from the vast space. Peering into the vast space of several hundred feet, one could see a hidden mysterious world within. Void Heaven Sword Valley. This mysterious world was none other than the venue for the sword fighting tournament of the Spirit Sea Realm, Void Heaven Sword Valley. The Void Heaven Sword Valley has opened. Seeing this mysterious world within the vast space, the breath of countless martial artists tightened, especially the Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators who were going to participate in the sword fighting tournament. Their hearts were pounding fiercely. Yichun and Jiang Yao were also greatly stirred at this moment. Even the flying swords within their sword palace acupoints began to move rapidly, indicating that there was something within the Void Heaven Sword Valley irresistibly attracting them. that Void Heaven Sword Chi. Void Heaven Sword Valley is now open. All Spirit Sea Realm Sword cultivators who have received the tokens qualifying for the sword fighting tournament, prepare to enter the Void Heaven Sword Valley. As the four great heavenly saints lifted the seal on Void Heaven Sword Valley and retreated, Snow Jade projected her voice towards everyone on the mountain. Boom! 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 As Snow Jade's voice fell, figures flew towards the entrance of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, the vast space several hundred feet in diameter. Swoosh! 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 As they flew past Snow Jade, they took out their sword fighting tournament tokens. When Snow Jade nodded and pointed towards the Void Heaven Sword Valley inside the vast space, the crowd flew into it, and in mere moments, they had entered the Void Heaven Sword Valley hidden within the space. The crowd surged, and in less than a moment, thousands of figures had flown into the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Let's go too. Yichun softly spoke to Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei, who was nearby. Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei nodded at the same time. Yichun, Sister Zhang Yao, Sister Lu Qingmei, you must try your best and condense as much Void Heaven Sword Chi as possible, Mu Qingqing said to the three with a smile. Mu Qingqing had not chosen to participate in the sword fighting tournament. She was not a sword cultivator and had not cultivated swordsmanship. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After nodding to Mu Qingqing, Yichun, with Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei by his side, flew towards the vast space behind the summit of Immeasurable Mountain. After taking out their sword fighting tournament tokens, the three, following the dense crowd, also flew into the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Chapter 324. Sword Chi Pierces the Skies. Yichun felt an inexplicable sensation of spatial transference envelop his entire body as he flew into the vast space and headed towards Void Heaven Sword Valley. This feeling was as if he had entered another world altogether. Clearly, within the few hundred zhang radius space atop Immeasurable Peak, which could conceal the entirety of the massive Void Heaven Sword Valley, there must be the power of spatial laws at play. When the force of spatial transference completely vanished, Yichun discovered that he had arrived in a vast and boundless world. Void Heaven Sword Valley. This world was none other than the place of sword fighting for the martial arts competition, the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Looking up at the sky of Void Heaven Sword Valley, one could see it filled with mysterious glows of morning light, with streams of air occasionally whizzing through the heavens and earth. Looking down at the ground, one could see that the entire place was pitted with holes. There were pits so large they were hundreds of zhang in diameter, their dark depths unfathomable, while the smaller ones were only a few dozen zhang across. There seemed to be countless pits, too many to count, stretching as far as the eye could see, possibly amounting to thousands upon thousands. From within these pits echoed a heart-palpitating sound of sword cries, and peering closer into the pits, one could glimpse sword chi in gold, sai and blue, crimson, and brown colors faintly appearing within. Void Heaven Sword Chi. Yichun had a feeling that the multicolored sword chi within these pits was the legendary Void Heaven Sword Chi, which could transform into true chi and even aid in understanding the 5 great heavenly void laws. Where's Zhang Yao? Lu Qingmei isn't here either? Yichun looked around and noticed that, like him, there were figures suspended in the void. These figures were spread out from each other, some by tens of zhang and others by thousands, and Yichun could sense that there were as many as 500 to 600 figures. However, among these figures, Yichun could not spot Zhang Yao or Lu Qingmei. The three of them had flown into Void Heaven Sword Valley together, yet after entering, they had become separated. Yichun moved, gliding through the void, and saw even more figures in this world. But still, he did not find Zhang Yao or Lu Qingmei. Strange. Could it be that Void Heaven Sword Valley is divided into several areas, and Zhang Yao and the others are not in this area? Yichun looked towards the figures in this world and shockingly discovered that these figures, like him, were all at the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm. All at the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea? Not a single one at the early or the late stage? Yichun floated in the air with sudden comprehension. Where is Yichun? In another part of the world, Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei were also flying through the air, searching for Yi-chun. Looking into this part of the world, one could see that these figures were all at the late stage of the Spirit Sea realm. Ah? All of us at the early stage of the Spirit Sea got put together. Could it be that sword fighting only matches people of the same cultivation level for the competition? In yet another area, several sword cultivators at the early stage of the Spirit Sea realm were gathered together, looking towards other early-stage sword cultivators. As everyone was pondering, the skies of all three realms simultaneously echoed with the voice of Elder Shao, Supreme Elder. Void Heaven Sword Valley is divided into three areas, namely the Spirit Sea Early-Stage Sword Fighting Area, the Spirit Sea Mid-Stage Sword Fighting Area, and the Spirit Sea Late-Stage Sword Fighting Area. The number of participants who have entered the Spirit Sea Early-Stage Sword Fighting Area is 1,322. For the Spirit Sea Mid-Stage Sword Fighting Area, there are 2,653 participants, and for the Spirit Sea Late-Stage Sword Fighting Area, there are a total of 5,893. On the first day, the three sword fighting areas are separated from each other, with the sword cultivators only allowed to compete within their respective areas. On the second day, the boundaries between the Spirit Sea Early-Stage Sword Fighting Area and the Spirit Sea Mid-Stage Sword Fighting Area will be broken down, allowing the sword cultivators from both areas to compete together. On the third day, the boundary of the most populated Spirit Sea Late-Stage Sword Fighting Area will also be broken down, and all the sword cultivators who have not been defeated from all three sword fighting areas will be able to join together to compete in swordsmanship. The 3 days of competition time for the martial arts competition are thus derived. Now, everyone start preparing to condense the Void Heaven Sword Chi. Once you have condensed the Void Heaven Sword Chi, and a Sword Chi light sphere forms outside your body, you will be able to sense the location of all the other Sword Chi light sphere sword cultivators in your area and compete with them. Moreover, you can bring out your strongest combat methods without worrying about death. Because these Sword Chi light spheres contain a mystical force, if you encounter a life-threatening situation that you can't withstand, the Sword Chi light sphere will fly towards the victor on its own, while the remaining half of the Sword Chi light sphere will carry the defeated into the Sword River for the eliminated within Void Heaven Sword Valley. So, fight without worries about death. Bring out your strongest power. All your fights are visible to us outside of Void Heaven Sword Valley. And even if you don't win first place, if you perform well, you will be noticed by the major sects, which will greatly benefit your future cultivation. And for the one who can seize first place, show your strongest ability and win. Not only will you reap the great benefits of Void Heaven Sword Chi, but as Heavenly Sacred Palace stated before, the one ranking first will be able to join Heavenly Sacred Palace immediately, and also receive a sacred sword as a reward from Heavenly Sacred Palace. In a quarter of an hour, Void Heaven Sword Chi will begin to erupt. All sword cultivators can start to condense the Void Heaven Sword Chi. Everyone, prepare to start your martial arts competition. Elder Shao, Supreme Elder's voice resonated across the skies of the three realms of Void Heaven Sword Valley. Looking towards these three realms, nearly 10,000 sword cultivators were suspended in the air, listening to Elder Shao, Supreme Elder's words. Looking outward from the Void Heaven Sword Valley towards the peak of Immeasurable Peak, all the martial artists watching the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament could see that everyone was looking up towards the void in the sky. At this moment, in the void, there were several huge light screens displaying the scenes from the three main areas within the Void Heaven Sword Valley: Central Region, Southern Territory, Western Wilderness, Eastern Star Pole Islands, Far Northern Ice Palace Snowfields. All the martial artists from various sects and regions who did not participate in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament were looking up at the scenes within the light screens in the sky. Just as the crowd outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley looked up at the light screens, and nearly 10,000 sword cultivators inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley listened to Elder Shao, Supreme Elder's words. Each of them was trying to keep their fluctuating spirits in check, looking down at each of the sword pits, waiting for the eruption of Sword Chi. The quarter of an hour from the time they entered the Void Heaven Sword Valley quickly approached. The moment that time arrived, the ground in the three main areas of the Void Heaven Sword Valley simultaneously erupted with the roaring sound of countless sword pits. Then pillars of Sword Chi shot into the sky. As these streams of sword chi burst forth from the pits, 5 colors of sword chi instantly merged into one, transforming into strands of miraculous, multicolored sword chi, surging towards the shadows in the sky with sudden force. It has started. The gathering of the void heaven sword chi light spheres has finally begun. Legend has it that the higher one's talent in swordsmanship, the larger the sword chi light sphere they can form, the more void heaven sword chi they can gather, and even if they fail in the end, they can retain half of the original sword chi they accumulated. This first step, gathering void heaven sword chi, is the most fundamental. Let's see, among these nearly 10,000 sword cultivators, who can gather the most void heaven sword chi? Who has the highest talent? Outside the void heaven sword valley, more than 30 heavenly saints, snow jade, Taoist wine sword, and other 9 hosts of the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament, as well as countless rotating pills and numerous Spirit Sea Realm martial artists who didn't participate in the tournament, all looked towards the light screens in the void. Through the light screens, one could see that all the figures floating in the void were gathering strands of void heaven sword chi around them. This void heaven sword chi was becoming more and more abundant around these sword cultivators, increasingly tumultuous, inside the void heaven sword valley, in the mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm. Is this void heaven sword chi? In the sky, Yi Chun floated calmly. His eyes were fixed on the surging void heaven sword chi erupting from the ground below, soaring upwards. Yi Chun sensed that as the void heaven sword chi burst forth, his whole being spirit, sword intent comprehension, including the Tai sword chi and the red fire flying sword within his sword palace acupoint, all began to stir spontaneously, as his intrinsic power related to swordsmanship stirred on its own. The void heaven sword chi below seemed to be drawn to him, crazily surging towards Yi Chen's body, eventually accumulating outside his body. Looking at others in the mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm, other sword cultivators were also absorbing and materializing void heaven sword chi. However, if one were to make an overall comparison, it would be seen that many sword cultivators were only able to gather the sword chi slowly, bit by bit. In contrast, at Yi Chen's side, the void heaven sword chi gathering around his body was like wild serpents and dragons, frenziedly accumulating. The speed and quantity of accumulation were by far dozens or even hundreds of times greater than those of others. Heaven! Who is that gathering such an immense amount of void heaven sword chi? This phenomenon caught the attention of the sword cultivators in the surrounding void in no time. Many glanced at the small sphere of sword chi they had just managed to gather around themselves, then towards Yi Chun, where an impressive expanse of sword chi had already formed, dozens of meters in size, and they were stunned, their eyes widening in shock. Outside the void heaven sword valley, the martial artists watching the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament also noticed the anomalies in various spots on the light screen. In the end, as Elder Shao Supreme Elder lightly tapped with his finger, everyone could see the light screen displaying a dozen shocking images of void heaven sword chi being gathered. What incredible speed and quantity of sword chi gathering! Heaven help us, there are 8 streams, all from the late-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm. Just by looking at the speed and amount of sword chi gathering, one can tell that there are 8 unbelievable swordsmanship geniuses in the late-stage area. Everyone turned their gaze to the faces within those 8 incredible sword chi streams. When the faces became clear, many exclaimed, "The one who has already gathered sword chi spanning dozens of meters. That's Lu Xiaojia, the favorite to win the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament. And that's Mo Biling, that is Mo Biling gathering void heaven sword chi. Heaven help us. He has already formed almost 100 meters in size of sword chi. There's Fong Luohan, another hot favorite for the championship. Indeed, they all have strong swordsmanship talents. Those 2 girls, who are they? I remember now. Those 2 girls seem to be the ones next to Yi Chun, Lu Qingmei, and Zhang Yao. Heaven help us. The amount of void heaven sword chi that Zhang Yao is gathering seems to be more than even Lu Xiaojia. Just as countless people were exclaiming at the sight of the busiest and most tumultuous late-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm, another voice filled with extreme excitement reached everyone's ears. You all, Look at the mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm. In the mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm, there's a towering sword chi, and the amount of Void Heaven sword chi being gathered seems to be even greater than those few streams in the late-stage area. Upon hearing this, everyone turned their heads to look at the mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm. Even Elder Shao Supreme Elder couldn't help but tap on the light screen in response to the astounding view, revealing the figure of the sword cultivator who was gathering the soaring sword chi. As they saw the young figure emerging from the tumultuous sword chi light sphere, the sword cultivators from the Southern Territory who were outside watching the tournament let out an incredibly excited scream. Yi-chan? It's Yi-chan! Chapter 325. The Pride of the Southern Territory. In the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm section of the sword fighting area, the quantity of sword chi that Yi-chan condensed actually surpassed that of the top sword cultivators in the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sector. Just from this light screen, it's evident that Yi-chan may very well be the entity among the nearly 10,000 participants of the sword fighting tournament who has condensed the most sword chi. No one in the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, and certainly not in the early-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, has condensed a quantity of Void Heaven sword chi that surpasses Yi-chan. As for the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, there's no need to even mention it. Yi-chan is undoubtedly number one. The more they shouted, the more excited the warriors from the Southern Territory became. This trip to the Central Region brought mixed feelings to the warriors from the Southern Territory. They were well aware that among the major regions of the barbaric wilderness continent, the overall strength of the Southern Territory was at a disadvantage. Lagging behind other regions was one thing, but upon their arrival at the immeasurable mountain in the Central Region, the Southern Territory warriors realized that their contingent strength couldn't even match their sworn enemies from the Western Wilderness, the 10 great demon sects. This realization made them even more uncomfortable, especially after hearing about the events at the plaza and learning that the 10 demon sects had encircled the Southern Territory cultivators. Their indignation was uncontainable. If not for Yi-chan, it is feared that the Southern Territory would have lost much face on the plaza. The Southern Territory had sent over 2,000 participants to join the two grand events in the Central Region. Among them, only about 200 had witnessed Yi-chan's strength in the plaza, and the rest had not seen his power with their own eyes. However, through word of mouth, all Southern Territory warriors subconsciously filled with expectations for Yi-chan, because they knew that among all the warriors they had brought to the Central Region, apart from Yi-chan, there was probably no one who could contend with warriors from other regions. Only Yi-chan was likely to bring glory to the entire Southern Territory. Expectations are expectations, but without witnessing firsthand, many of the Southern Territory warriors were still somewhat worried. But now, as soon as Yi-chan entered the Void Heaven Sword Valley and began condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi, such a powerful display completely reassured the warriors from the Southern Territory. With such miraculous performance from the outset, coupled with the various rumors of Yi-chan's strength, all warriors from the Southern Territory knew that Yi-chan might truly bring great honor to the entire Southern Territory this time. Yi-chan, born in the Southern Territory and stronger than the top sword cultivators from the Central Region, even far surpassing the sword cultivators from the Western Wilderness. How could this not fill the warriors of the Southern Territory with immense pride? Yi-chan, the warrior of the Southern Territory. The pride of the Southern Territory. Considering that the Southern Territory could raise its head high in front of the 10 great demon sects from the Western Wilderness, and that its warriors were even stronger than the disciples of the great sects in the Central Region, many cultivators from the Southern Territory even felt their eyes well up with tears. The female cultivators, having seen Yi-chan in the light screen, had tears of pride rolling in their eyes. Wiping away those tears, they shouted even louder, cheering for Yi-chan. It wasn't just the Southern Territory warriors who were incredibly excited. When they clearly saw the most potent and surprising surge of sword chi in the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm section of the sword fighting area had been condensed by Yi-chan, Elder Shao Supreme Elder in the Void kept nodding his head in approval. And Mu Qingqing's little face turned red with excitement. Even though the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament was only a contest of sword fighting art, and she knew of Yi-chan's unparalleled prowess, Mu Qingqing was concerned that Yi Chun might be at a disadvantage solely in the competition of sword-fighting art. But now, all of Mu Qingqing's worries had flown away. The scene before her eyes made it clear that Yi Chen's sword Dao talent was just as incomparably profound as the divine soul innate potential previously displayed in the divine sword, leaving all others far behind. Moreover, knowing the power of the high-level sword formations Yi Chun commanded, Mu Qingqing was no longer worried about the upcoming sword fights. Instead, she was filled with anticipation. A genius of heaven is just like this, without any weaknesses to speak of, and with strength so incredible they're beyond belief. While Elder Shao Supreme Elder and Mu Qingqing felt happy for Yi Chun, other heavenly saints, including the 3 mid-stage heavenly saints from the Heavenly Sacred Palace and the 4 heavenly saints from the 4 top third-rank sword sects, were also nodding their heads in agreement. Onlookers from other regions outside the arena, observing Yi Chun in the void light screen as well as Zhang Yao, Lu Qingmei, and Lu Xiaojiao's performances, were also engaged in heated discussions. In all the regions, none felt a greater sense of repression than the area belonging to the Western Wilderness's 10 great demon sects. In the light screen, not only did the Southern Territory have Yi Chen's miraculous performance, but Zhang Yao was equally powerful. Not to mention the Central region with figures like Lu Xiaojia, Mo Beiling, and Fang Luohan, who, although slightly weaker than Yi Chun, were nonetheless impressively strong. There was also Lu Qingmei from the Eastern Pole Star Islands, and even from the extremely northern Icy Palace snowfield, which had fewest cultivators and sword cultivators present. There were still 2 sword cultivators in the early-stage Spirit Sea Realm section who displayed extraordinary might. By comparison, none from the 10 great demon sects of the Western Wilderness had truly made a mark for the Western Wilderness that drew admiration from warriors of other regions. This certainly left quite a sour taste in the mouths of the Western Wilderness's 10 great demon sects. They had originally claimed to be stronger than the Southern Territory. But now, just the Southern Territory's Yi Chun and Zhang Yao alone had left countless Western Wilderness warriors far behind. As over 100,000 warriors outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley watched the light screens, screaming, thrilling, or feeling disappointed, with countless thoughts swirling in their hearts. Inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, nearly 10,000 sword cultivators gathering the Void Heaven Sword Chi had now entered a truly stable phase. Strong sword cultivators like Yi Chun, Zhang Yao, Lu Xiaojia, Mo Beiling, and others continued to condense the Void Heaven Sword Chi, while many of the weaker sword cultivators had already completed the step of condensing Void Heaven Sword Chi. When the first sword cultivator finished condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi, the 4 third-rank sword sect heavenly saints simultaneously took a step outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley and pointed with the swords that had initially fixed the valley towards the void above. Boom! 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 In the spaces higher up beyond the numerous light screens outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, as well as in the sky above the 3 major sword fighting areas within it, a gigantic sword silhouette simultaneously appeared. In the instant that the vast sword shadow appeared, the sword cultivators who had completed the accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi within the Void Heaven Sword Valley saw their sword fighting qualification tokens emit a strange glow, illuminating the spheres of Void Heaven Sword Chi around their bodies. At this moment, above the skies of the 3 major areas outside and inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, the enormous sword shadow created by the efforts of the 4 great heavenly saints began to display characters etched upon it. Wang Lu, Western Wilderness, a total accumulation of 3,845 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Xiaolong, Southern Territory, a total accumulation of 4,232 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Zhao Jiukui, Western Wilderness, a total accumulation of 4,563 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Wang Chong, Central Region, a total accumulation of 13,269 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. As each sword cultivator completed the accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi, their names, regions of origin, and the number of Void Heaven Sword Chi strands they had gathered appeared on the colossal sword shadow. By the look of it, this vast sword shadow was evidently designed to display the quantities of Void Heaven Sword Chi accumulated by all the sword cultivators participating in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament. With the aid of the sword fighting tournament qualification tokens and the spheres of Void Heaven Sword Chi inside the valley, to be able to display everyone's quantities of Void Heaven Sword Chi was an astonishing and unparalleled feat. This giant sword shadow is none other than the Void Heaven Sword ranking, jointly refined with the assistance of the Void Heaven Sword Valley and the sword fighting qualification tokens. Now, the quantities of Void Heaven Sword Chi for all sword cultivators will continuously be presented on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Once everyone has completed their accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi and the sword fighting matches begin, depending on the number of Void Heaven Sword Chi strands seized, the ranking on the Void Heaven Sword ranking will change once again. Ultimately, 3 days later, the one at the very top of the Void Heaven Sword ranking will be the champion of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament. The voice of Elder Shao Supreme Elder reached everyone watching outside, as well as all the sword cultivators inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley participating in the tournament. Countless people lifted their heads to behold the giant sword shadow and the characters inscribed upon it. Whiz, whiz, whiz. As more and more sword cultivators completed their accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi, the names and scores of Void Heaven Sword Chi began to appear more frequently from the bottom to the top of the enormous sword shadow. With the presence of the Void Heaven Sword ranking, everyone could now see the results of the various sword cultivators in the tournament more clearly. When the Void Heaven Sword ranking listed over 1,000 names, from bottom to top, those ranked above the 1,000th place had already accumulated more than 100,000 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. This development made Elder Shao and others nod in approval. This time, there are a total of 9,868 participants in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament. Since it is after more than 2,000 years that third-rank sword sect disciples are participating again, the qualifications for the tournament have been significantly relaxed. The number of participants in this sword fighting tournament can be said to be the highest in history. However, despite the large number of participants, the results are not bad at all. Aside from the weaker choices selected early on at the lower end, the scores at the intermediate level were in no way inferior to those sword cultivators who entered the Void Heaven Sword Valley more than 2,000 years ago. Moreover, the real powerhouses have not even finished accumulating Void Heaven Sword Chi yet. As he said this, Elder Zhao's gaze also swept across individuals in the Void Heaven Sword Valley such as Yi Qian, Zhang Yao, Lu Yingmei, and Lu Xiaojia. I'm afraid that this time, the strongest group might surpass the highest scores ever achieved in the Void Heaven Sword Valley in the accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Elder Zhao's words caused Mu Qingqing to shift her gaze thoughtfully. I'm not sure about the others, but looking at this, Yi Chen's final accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi may very well reach tens of millions. Boom! 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 Amidst the discussions of the crowd and the anticipatory gazes of the martial artists watching the tournament, more and more names began to appear on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Over 3,000 people. Over 5,000 people. Over 7,000 people. When the quantity of people who had completed their accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi on the ranking surpassed 9,000, with just a few hundred left to complete, the names on the Void Heaven Sword ranking on the giant sword shadow had reached the uppermost area. At this point, the quantity of Void Heaven Sword Chi accumulated by the sword cultivators in the topmost region had reached more than 800,000 strands. Then, both outside and inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, whether they were martial artists observing the tournament or sword cultivators who had already completed their accumulation of Void Heaven Sword Chi, everyone looked up, staring intently at the uppermost area of the huge sword shadow, watching every new name that appeared on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Because at this time, there were only a few hundred people left who had not appeared on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. These were the few hundred people with the strongest sword Dao talent among all sword cultivators. Everyone wanted to know, in the end, who would be at the very top. Chapter 326 Rankings. Luo Qianqing. From the Eastern Star Islands, congruity with 5,983,000 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. When the last youngster in the early stage of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fight area finished condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi, there were only 10 people left in the entire venue who had yet to complete this step. This Luo Qianqing from the Eastern Star Islands, with his early Spirit Sea Realm stage, had condensed enough Void Heaven Sword Chi to rank 11th, earning the admiration of everyone for the youth. However, even more attention was already focused on the remaining 2 areas, on the last 10 people. The last 10 people were the strongest 10 in Sword Dao talent out of the more than 9,000 participants in the Spirit Sea Realm Sword fighting competition. Xianyuan Wuhan, from the Polar Ice Palace Plains, congruity with 6,254,823 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. When another sword cultivator in the late stage of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword fight area finished condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi, the ranking on the Great Sword Shadow of the Void Heaven Sword ranking had reached the 10th place. In 10th place, Polar Ice Palace Plains, Xianyuan Wuhan. In 9th place, Central Region, Ling Yu. In 8th place, Central Region, Xiaofeng. When the number 1 Spirit Sea Sword cultivator from the 3rd rank sword sect Taiya Sword Sect, Xiaofeng, also finished condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi, ranking 8th, many warriors outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley stood up. Xiaofeng, one of the favorites to win the championship, had completed the condensation of the Void Heaven Sword Chi, and the number of remaining people was getting fewer and fewer. In 7th place, Central Region, Fang Luohan. In 6th place, Polar Ice Palace Plains, Murong Chi Chi, congruity with 8,236,900 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. When the Void Heaven Sword ranking reached the 6th place, a girl named Murong Chi Chi also finished condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi. There was only one person left in the entire mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm Sword fight area still condensing the Void Heaven Sword Chi. Yichen. In the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm Sword fight area, the only one left was Yichan. The remaining 4 who had not yet completed the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation were all in the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm Sword fight area. Seeing that there were only 5 people left who hadn't completed the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation, the breath of all the warriors watching the sword fighting competition tightened. These 5 people were going to be within the top 5 ranks in this first step of Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation. The first place was among these 5. Seeing that Lu Xiaojia, Mo Bailing, Lu Qingmei, Zhang Yao, and Yi Chun were among these 5, the warriors from the Southern Territory couldn't contain their excitement anymore. Yi Chun and Zhang Yao were both from the Southern Territory. It was incredible that 2 people from the Southern Territory had made it to the top 5. This was by far the best result for the warriors from the Southern Territory participating in various grand events in the Central Region. When the ranking reached the top 5, all eyes from the Heavenly Sacred Palace were glued to the Void Heaven Sword ranking. The sword cultivators in Void Heaven Sword Valley who had completed the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation, including Xiaofeng, Murong Chi Chi, Fang Luohan, and others, were also looking up at the colossal sword shadow in the sky with complex emotions. At that moment, in the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm Sword fight area, another person finally completed the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation. Mo Bailing, Central Region, congruity with 8,394,329 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi, ranking 5th. Boom! Ranking 5th. There are actually 4 people stronger than me. Mo Bailing, who had completed the condensation of the Void Heaven Sword Chi, clenched her fists tightly before relaxing them again. Who could it be? Who has greater sword Dao talent than me? No matter, this is only the first step of the sword fighting competition. The real sword fight hasn't started yet. Fighting with swords isn't just about talent. It's also about sword technique and combat strength. Even if I'm ranked 5th now, I'm going to take the Void Heaven Sword Chi from others and push for the first place later. Mo Bailing's gaze flickered as she looked back at the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Boom! Boom! Right then, 2 people almost simultaneously completed the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation. Lu Qingmei, from the Eastern Star Islands, congruity with 9,463,000 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Ranking 4th, Lu Xiaojia, Central Region, congruity with 9,512,400 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Ranking 3rd. When Lu Qingmei and Lu Xiaojia looked up at the Void Heaven Sword ranking as well, there were only the 2nd and 1st places left to be determined on the entire ranking. At that moment, the warriors from the Southern Territory were going insane, because the last two whose ranks had not yet been determined were none other than the two from the Southern Territory, Zhang Yao and Yi Chun. My goodness! The warriors from the Southern Territory were speechless, many of them so overwhelmed with excitement that tears streamed uncontrollably down their cheeks. The top two slots being from the Southern Territory meant they had produced two supreme sword cultivators, the ones with real power to surpass all other sword cultivators from the major territories. Having Yi Chun be so strong had already been a delightful surprise for the warriors from the Southern Territory. Even Zhang Yao reaching this level was something the Southern Territory warriors found utterly unbelievable and joyously surprising. These warriors had heard that Zhang Yao's most formidable skill was not her swordsmanship. The most incredible technique isn't even the swordsmanship, which is already so strong. I can't even imagine what level of talent Zhang Yao must possess to be this formidable. Sister Zhang Yao. Yi Chun. At this moment, when Lu Qingmei didn't see Yi Chun and Zhang Yao's names on the Void Heaven Sword ranking, she knew that Yi Chun and Zhang Yao hadn't completed their Void Heaven Sword Qi gathering, and that Yi Chun and Zhang Yao were the last to be ranked second and first respectively. This deeply astonished Lu Qingmei as well. The technique Sister Zhang Yao used on the square, if I'm not mistaken, is divine arts. A kind of divine arts that's not swordsmanship. My God. I never thought Sister Zhang Yao's swordsmanship would be so strong. While Lu Qingmei was filled with envy, out beyond the Void Heaven Sword Valley, Mu Qingqing's enchanting face bloomed with a smile, her beautiful eyes shining brightly as they emitted light. Yi Chun and Sister Zhang Yao. They are actually the top two. My God. This time, I've really found two absolute geniuses for the heavenly sacred palace, supreme prodigies. Just when Mu Qingqing was about to take credit before Elder Shao Supreme Elder, she noticed that Elder Shao Supreme Elder and several heavenly saints were staring at the Void Heaven Sword Qi around Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, mouths agape in astonishment. What's the matter, Elder Shao? Mu Qingqing asked Elder Shao Supreme Elder. Heaven. Heaven. Elder Shao Supreme Elder sighed several times before coming back to his senses. Over 2,000 years ago, across hundreds of Spirit Sea Realm sword competitions, I remember the highest record being the gathering of more than 950,000 strands of Void Heaven Sword Qi, roughly the same as Lu Xiaojia's achievement. But looking at Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, the amount of Void Heaven Sword Qi around them right now is several times more than that of Lu Xiaojia. As Elder Shao Supreme Elder spoke, Mu Qingqing also looked at Yi Chun and Zhang Yao's positions on the screen. When she saw the vast amounts of Void Heaven Sword Qi gathered around Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, forming a massive luminous sphere towering more than 8,000 zhang in height and over 3,000 zhang in width, Mu Qingqing's mouth hung open. This quantity of sword qi, just the sight of it, was incredibly frightening. The amount of Void Heaven Sword Qi alone is probably enough for Zhang Yao to break through to the rotating pill realm. If Yi Chun and Zhang Yao were to additionally take more sword qi from others through combat, their spheres of Void Heaven Sword Qi could exceed 10,000 zhang. Naturally, this left Mu Qingqing in utter shock. It could exceed 40 million strands of Void Heaven Sword Qi. The heavenly saints were also astonished. This sword qi, if all converted into true qi, would be enough for someone in the early stages of the rotating pill realm to break through to the middle stage. If either Yi Chun or Zhang Yao can stand until the end, without having to take anyone else's Void Heaven Sword Qi, and just by not losing their own Sword Qi, they will definitely be able to break through to the rotating pill realm. Outside the arena, countless martial artists screamed continuously upon seeing that heaven-shattering Void Heaven Sword Qi around Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, and the heavenly saints found it unbelievable. In the Void Heaven Sword Valley, the sword cultivators near Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, upon seeing the grand spheres of Void Heaven Sword Qi shooting up into the sky around them, widened their eyes in awe. Among the two vast areas where Yi Chun and Zhang Yao were located, many sword cultivators who saw the two towering beacons from afar surged towards them, gathering around the two. The sword cultivators in the area around Yi Chun were from the middle stage of the Spirit Sea Realm, and they did not dare to approach Yi Chun. As for Zhang Yao, the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators around her were quite restless, with many eagerly eyeing Zhang Yao, for if they could defeat her and take half of her sword chi, they might well rise to first place. Zhang Yao was still in the process of condensing her Void Heaven Sword chi, and Lu Qingmei was not far from her. Seeing that many late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators were gathering around with malicious intent, Lu Qingmei swiftly drew the snow-white sword in her hand. Sister Zhang Yao is still gathering Void Heaven Sword chi. If you want to fight with swords, wait until she's done. Now, anyone who dares to disturb Sister Zhang Yao's gathering of Void Heaven Sword chi, don't blame me for eliminating them on the spot. Lu Qingmei's action caused the late-stage Spirit Sea Sword cultivators to shoot glances filled with agitation, and upon seeing the equally massive Void Heaven Sword chi around Lu Qingmei, they paused, stopping in their tracks. However, it was clear that although they refrained from acting immediately, they had no intentions of giving up on fighting Zhang Yao, or even Lu Qingmei. After all, having great talent and gathering a lot of Void Heaven Sword chi doesn't necessarily mean one's swordsmanship is solid. Those who came to participate in the sword competition, especially in the late-stage Spirit Sea fighting areas, few sword cultivators would concede to others. They naturally wanted to take the Void Heaven Sword chi from others, striving for an even higher ranking. And so, as many late-stage Spirit Sea Sword cultivators stood not far from Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei, ready to make their move, in the middle-stage Spirit Sea fighting area, there were also many sword cultivators who sat in the void around Yichun, watching him gather Void Heaven Sword chi. Finally, Zhang Yao completed her gathering of the Void Heaven Sword chi as well. Boom! 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 As the last strand of five-colored sword chi merged into the sphere of Void Heaven Sword chi around Zhang Yao, her sphere of Void Heaven Sword chi suddenly burst forth with endless multicolored radiance. At the same time, on the giant shadow of the sword of the Void Heaven Sword ranking, the second-place inscription appeared: Zhang Yao, Southern Territory, gathered 43,042,800 strands of Void Heaven Sword chi. After the amount of Zhang Yao's gathered Void Heaven Sword chi was revealed, both inside and outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, there was a collective shock. Because the number of Void Heaven Sword chi Zhang Yao had gathered was actually more than the combined total of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and other strong sword cultivators. This completely surpassed many warriors' imaginations. But what shocked them even more was that such an achievement from Zhang Yao was still only good for second place. There was still one more competitor, who hadn't finished gathering their Void Heaven Sword chi yet. With this thought, all eyes turned towards the only youth in the Void Heaven Sword Valley, who had yet to finish his gathering of Void Heaven Sword chi, converging on Yichun. Chapter 327 First. In the mid-stage Spirit Sea Sword fighting area, Yichun didn't care about the countless gazes fixed on him, many of whom were seated nearby watching him condense the Void Heaven Sword chi. His entire attention was focused on the Su Tian Sword chi light group outside his body. What no one knew was that as the quantity of Void Heaven Sword chi outside Yichun exceeded 40 million strands, a scroll of the Baiming secret tome that had been hidden within Yichun's divine soul, previously obtained from the divine artifact Fallen Sword, began to slowly unfold of its own accord. The Baiming secret tome was the Baiming clan's sword Dao divine art, representing the ultimate secret technique for sword cultivation. The first layer of the tome, the all-encompassing divine diagram, pertains to the cultivation of sword intent levels. After Yichun had completed this layer within the divine sword, practicing high-level sword formations became a breeze. The second layer of the Baiming secret tome, known as the Su Tian Wu Ji 2, is dedicated to cultivating an existence within the sword Dao layers that transcends sword intent, the even more powerful law sword seeds. Ever since Yichun had completed the all-encompassing divine diagram, he had been studying the cultivation method of the second layer, the Su Tian Wu Ji Tuesday. According to the diagram, once someone masters this, they can directly condense the metal, wood, water, fire, earth, 5 types of law sword seeds within their body, possessing unimaginable sword Dao potency. Even when advancing to the latter stages of the Spirit Sea and making a breakthrough into the rotating pill realm, one could use the 5 law sword seeds to draw upon the 5 great heavenly void laws, not only achieving the most perfect rotating pill formation of the 5 orifices, but also stepping into the third level of Sword Dao cultivation, the Law Sword realm. Seeing the sheer power of the Su Tian Wu Ji2, Yi Chun naturally continued his cultivation, but despite spending much time, he had not been able to fully comprehend this second layer. It was only after arriving at the immeasurable mountain, clashing with warriors from the western wilderness, even confronting strong late-rotating pill realm cultivators like Bai Wuchen, and facing the saintly pressure of Yudo from the heavens, that Yi Chun suddenly experienced an epiphany. Then, in the 3 days before the start of the sword fighting tournament, Yi Chun went into seclusion to cultivate specifically in order to step into the Su Tian Wu Ji Tuesday. As a result of 3 days of enlightenment and intense cultivation, Yi Chun finally unlocked the cultivation method of the Su Tian Wu Ji2, truly beginning the process of condensing the metal, wood, water, fire, earth, 5 types of law sword seeds within his divine soul. This process, as recorded in the Su Tian Wu Ji2, would take a long time, and it was very possible that it would only be successfully completed when the 5 great heavenly void laws descended during the breakthrough into the rotating pill realm. However, once Yi Chun in the sword-fighting area had condensed over 40 million strands of void heaven sword chi outside his body, he was amazed to find that within the light of the multicolored sword chi, there seemed to be 5 dazzling seeds slowly being born. 5 types of law sword seeds. This was exactly what Yi Chun had been struggling to cultivate, the law sword seeds that were even more formidable than sword intent. Before entering the Void Heaven Sword Valley, Yi Chun had heard others say that Void Heaven Sword Chi was helpful for comprehending the 5 great heavenly void laws. Yi Chun had never expected that after he had condensed enough Void Heaven Sword Chi, it would first greatly aid the cultivation of his Su Tian Wu Ji2, bringing him a pleasant surprise. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The others were watching as Yi Chun's body continued to accumulate Void Heaven Sword Chi, but only Yi Chun knew that at this moment, those 5 dazzling seeds in the Void Heaven Sword Chi were flying towards his divine soul, and according to the cultivation method of the Su Tian Wu Ji2, they were starting to take real shape inside his body. Boom! 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 When the Void Heaven Sword Chi outside Yi Chun surged over 90,000 zhang high, almost reaching 100,000 zhang, everyone watching Yi Chun condense the Void Heaven Sword Chi had their mouths agape in shock, while inside Yi Chun, the 5 types of law sword seeds were finally reaching the last stage of cultivation completion. As the multicolored Void Heaven Sword Chi roared furiously outside of Yi Chun, the Su Tian Wu Ji2, within his divine soul also began emitting frenzied rays of light, and finally, under the combination of these 2 extraordinary forces, 5 shining sword light seeds began to form above the diagram within Yi Chun's divine soul. These 5 sword light seeds were linked to the 5 great heavenly void laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, law sword seeds. When these 5 law sword seeds took shape, Yi Chun's entire divine soul seemed illuminated by the seeds. Instantaneously, Yi Chun even felt as if he could sense the 5 strange law forces above the heavenly void. Although this feeling was fleeting, Yi Chun was certain that if his chi was sufficient and he reached the extreme latter stage of the Spirit Sea, when he began to break through to the rotating pill realm, with the help of these 5 law sword seeds, he would definitely be able to summon the presence of the 5 great heavenly void laws. By completing this step in cultivation, Yi Chun not only elevated his swordsmanship combat power beyond the level of sword intent, but also laid a solid foundation for his future ascent into the rotating pill realm. Within his divine soul, Yi Chun sensed the newly formed 5 law sword seeds. Outside his body, Yi Chun's Void Heaven Sword Chi converged, finally reaching the final stage at last. Its speed of condensation grew slower and slower. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! As the last few streams of multicolored sword chi surged into the Su Tian Sword Chi light group outside Yi Chun's body, and no more Void Heaven Sword Chi flowed towards him, Yi Chun had fully comprehended the 5 law sword seeds and opened his eyes. At the same moment that Yi Chun opened his eyes, in the void, the first name finally appeared on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Yi Chun, Southern Territory, has condensed 46,279,988 strands of Su Tian Sword Chi. Yi Chun, in the first step of the sword fighting competition, took first place in the Void Heaven Sword Chi condensation battle. Wow! When this result was displayed in the skies above the early, middle, and latter Spirit Sea stages of the sword fighting area in the Void Heaven Sword Valley, and amidst the boundless peaks of Void Heaven where countless martial artists observed from outside the valley, a tumult erupted in all four areas, astonishing a myriad of warriors. Yichun had condensed over 2 million more strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi than Zhang Yao, who had achieved an unbelievable second place. This was, by far, the most unbelievable record in the history of the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competition. Over 46,279,988 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Gazing at the first ranking name on the Void Heaven Sword ranking, Elder Shao Supreme Elder's eyes shone brightly. Yichen's swordsmanship potential is this strong as well. Indeed, strong innate potential in the divine soul greatly aids swordsmanship talent. Yichen, over 46,279,988 strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Sister Zhang Yao, over 43,424,988 strands. The two of them combined have almost condensed more Void Heaven Sword Chi than the total condensed by the top 100 sword cultivators. Mu Qingqing now had stars in her eyes as she spoke. Although Elder Shao Supreme Elder and others were surprised, they were not so shocked as to lose composure, but other martial artists had gone completely mad. Especially the warriors from the Southern Territory, when the scores of Yichun and Zhang Yao clearly appeared on the Void Heaven Sword ranking in the first and second places, all the more than 2,000 warriors in the entire Southern Territory region let out sky-shaking screams. This! In the region of the 10 demon sects of the Western Wilderness, individuals like Bai Wuchen and the other demon sect disciples, as well as the ascetic responsible for the demon sect selections for the sword fighting competition, all opened their mouths in stunned disbelief. Within the Void Heaven Sword Valley, many powerful sword cultivators in the three regions, such as Lu Xiaojia and Mo Bailing, looking up at the Void Heaven Sword ranking in the void, clenched their fists tightly.
Yichen.
Zhang Yao, who had just finished condensing her Void Heaven Sword Chi and was conversing with Lu Qingmei, learned of the surrounding situation and then saw Yichen's score on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Seeing that Yichen's score was better than hers, Zhang Yao smiled sweetly. I knew it. Yichun is still that impressive. Chapter 328. Flying Sword Leaves. When Yichen's ranking at the top was announced, the entire arena, both inside and outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, was astounded. This shock persisted for dozens of breaths, and then an earth-shaking disturbance began to sweep through all three of the major sword-fighting zones of the Void Heaven Sword Valley. One could only see that as the Void Heaven Sword ranking above the void in the three major sword-fighting zones flashed brightly, countless flying leaves burst forth from the sword pits below the entire Void Heaven Sword Valley. These flying leaves fluttered between heaven and earth in the Void Heaven Sword Valley, drifting among the myriad sword cultivators. As these leaves took flight, all the sword cultivators felt that with the newly condensed clusters of Void Heaven Sword Chi around their bodies, they could sense the locations of all the other cultivators within their fighting zones. Each of the three major fighting zones spanned thousands of miles, but this sense of perception completely enveloped the entire zones, allowing all sword cultivators to locate their opponents within their respective zones. At the same time, the swords in the hands of the cultivators began to move wildly, as if preparing for the imminent battles. The flying leaves of the sword pits, the illuminated figures of opponents by the sword chi clusters, and the swords in their hands were all eager for battle. All these signs indicated that after the Void Heaven Sword Chi had been fully condensed, the true highlight of the sword fighting tournament, the Sword Combat Challenge, would begin. Sword leaves fly, sword fighting begins. The Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament, with 3 days of sword fighting time, starts now. The results on the Void Heaven Sword ranking are just your initial results and do not reflect your final rankings. Defeat other sword cultivators. Seize their Void Heaven Sword Chi to enlarge your own Sword Chi cluster. Battle will change the rankings. Who can truly stand until the end? Who can be the first when the sword fighting tournament concludes? After 3 days, all will become clear. Now, begin your battle. As Elder Shao Supreme Elder's voice echoed through the three major regions of the Void Heaven Sword Valley once again. All the sword cultivators stirred with sword intents. Sword fighting. The true sword fighting had finally started. Sword cultivators, by nature, advance forward with their swords, clearing thorns and brambles as part of their cultivation. As sword cultivators participating in the sword fighting tournament, nobody would feel fear, nobody would evade. Even if they could not seize first place or stand till the end, they would still defeat several other cultivators to battle for the honor of their swords. Yi Chen, you're currently in first place. But that doesn't mean you'll still be first at the end. In the later stage Spirit Sea Realm Fighting Zone, Mo Biling's eyes burned with fighting spirit. We are now in different fighting zones, and it won't be until the third day that we can meet. For now, let me accumulate my own sword chi. On the third day, I'll compete with you for the top spot. Mo Biling, with a fighting spirit ablaze, sensed the position of a sword cultivator closest to him through the cluster of void heaven sword chi outside his body, and then he blasted towards that cultivator at high speed. Sword fighting. Sword fighting has begun. Rush for more void heaven sword chi. Without fighting to the very end, no one knows who will have the last laugh. After all, even if Yi Chun is currently first, as long as I can defeat him when we confront each other, I can take half of his void heaven sword chi and surpass him directly. In the later stage Spirit Sea Realm Fighting Zone, at another location, Lu Xiaojia's eyes also surged with fighting intent, as he waved his hand and unleashed sword intents to attack a nearby sword cultivator. After Elder Shao Supreme Elder's words settled, it was not only Mo Biling and Lu Xiaojia who started fighting. Throughout all three major fighting zones, real sword fighting matchups had begun. In the later stage Spirit Sea Realm Fighting Zone where Zhang Yao was located, as early as when Zhang Yao finished condensing her Void Heaven Sword Chi, she had already attracted the attention of no fewer than 30 sword cultivators. Now, as the actual sword fighting commenced, all 30 cultivators turned their gaze towards her. At that moment, Zhang Yao's cluster of Void Heaven Sword Chi outside her body surged to over 8,000 feet in height, which was incredibly alluring. This sword chi cluster, which could not be used yet and could only be absorbed after the 3 days of sword fighting, was enticing to the cultivators surrounding Zhang Yao. Even though the Void Heaven Sword Chi was condensed by Zhang Yao herself, as soon as she was defeated, they could directly snatch away half of her sword chi. Naturally, this made the sword cultivators encircling her very tempted. Zhang Yao knew what these people were thinking, as Lu Qingmei had informed her of the surrounding situation after she had finished condensing her Void Heaven Sword Chi. So you all want to take my Void Heaven Sword Chi? The young girl smiled lightly. Her eyes looked towards the Void Heaven Sword ranking in the sky. At this moment, as bouts of sword fighting unfolded, the quantities of Void Heaven Sword Chi behind countless names on the Void Heaven Sword ranking had started to change. I am in the later stage Spirit Sea Realm Fighting Zone, while Yi Chun is in the middle stage Spirit Sea Realm Fighting Zone. Now, let the sword fighting begin, and may the best claim the sword chi. Perhaps when Yi Chun and I meet, both of our Void Heaven Sword Chi will have grown by a lot. After murmuring to herself, the girl raised her icy blue sword, looking at the surrounding sword cultivators. Lu told me many of you want to challenge me. Now step forward. I welcome your challenge. After Zhang Yao spoke, Lu Qingmei also looked up at the Void Heaven Sword ranking and smiled. The gathering of Void Heaven Sword Chi has ended, and now, the real sword fighting begins. Whoosh! Lu Qingmei similarly drew her snow-white sword, looking at the warriors around her. Who wishes to sword fight with me? Come forward. I have a fair amount of Void Heaven Sword Chi myself. If you have the ability, come and take it. These two young girls truly possess remarkable talent. But real swordplay in battle isn't just about talent. It doesn't mean that high talent equals strong combat power. Boom! Boom! After Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei agreed to fight, two figures immediately flew out from the crowd and charged toward them with swords ready. Sword fighting. One-on-one combat. The loser will lose half their Void Heaven Sword Chi and be transported to the loser's area, within a sword river in the Void Heaven Sword Valley. As per the traditions of the sword fighting tournament, the loser will also leave their treasured sword behind as a sign of respect to the victor and to the more powerful sword cultivators. At that moment, as Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei began their battle, more than 1,000 duels were taking place simultaneously across the 3 major sword-fighting arenas. Some had even been eliminated, leaving behind their treasured swords and being sent to the losers area. While countless battles raged like wildfire, Yi Chun watched the many sword cultivators nearby, his eyes brimming with a fighting spirit. Although he had secured first place in the first step of gathering sword chi, Yi Chun was far from complacent and wouldn't stop there. Yi Chun hadn't forgotten why he was participating in the sword fighting tournament. He was here to exchange blows with sword cultivators from all over, and more importantly, to hone his swordplay and advance toward a higher realm of the sword path. Just over 40 million strands of Void Heaven sword chi. Of course, Yi Chun wasn't satisfied. He intended to win even more Void Heaven sword chi, defeat more sword cultivators, accumulate truly astonishing sword chi, and eventually transform that sword chi into true chi to make a bid for the late Spirit Sea realm, or even the rotating pill realm. Yi Chun was incredibly eager to reach the late Spirit Sea realm. Perhaps the Void Heaven Sword Valley would be the very place he broke through. Come on! Sword fighting! With a whoosh, Yi Chun unsheathed his Black Fire Sword. Black Fire Sword, his weapon for the sword fighting tournament. Yi Chun wouldn't let this sword be defeated by anyone. He would carry this sword, along with a sword cultivator's glory, to battle sword cultivators from all around. Boom! As Yi Chun drew the Black Fire Sword, the floating leaves around him seemed to be stirred by sword intents, swirling around him. Amidst the swirling leaves and surging battle intent, a young sword cultivator who had been sitting near Yi Chun flew towards him first. This youth, having watched Yi Chun's final gathering of Void Heaven Sword Chi, naturally knew that Yi Chun was currently the top figure on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Despite his immense respect for Yi Chun, the youngster wouldn't truly fear him without engaging in real combat. After all, possessing strong talent and gathering much Void Heaven Sword Chi didn't mean one's actual sword skills were perfected already. This youth also entertained the thought of taking away half of Yi Chun's Void Heaven Sword Chi. Without any unnecessary words, after flying opposite Yi Chun, the young sword cultivator simply said, "Central Region, Fong Ming, currently 39th on the Void Heaven Sword ranking, here to challenge." Yi Chun observed the young man's circumference of over 2,000 feet of Void Heaven Sword Chi and nodded. Without wasting words, he responded, "Southern Territory, Yi Chun. Challenge accepted. Make your move." As Yi Chun's words fell, the myriad of sword leaves swirling in the void around the two soared even higher. Chapter 329. Ice Palace, Murong 77. Amidst the whirling leaves of swords in the sky, Fong Ming and Yi Chun stood facing each other in the void, about 70 to 80 feet apart. After entering Void Heaven Sword Valley, all true chi skills of the sword cultivators and other means of attack became ineffective. Apart from their inherent flight abilities in the Spirit Sea realm, their means of attack were reduced to swordplay alone. The sword fighting tournament was all about the swordsmanship. "Yi Chun, my friend, shall you make the first move or shall I?" Fong Ming called out to Yi Chun from across the void. Yi Chun smiled. "If I make the first move, I'm afraid you won't get a chance to strike at all." "That's quite domineering," Fong Ming retorted with an unconvinced smile, and with a whoosh, he drew a cyan treasure sword from his hand. "In that case, let me test just how formidable you really are, brother Yi Chun." Boom! The tip of Fong Ming's sword pointed at Yi Chun, and from the void, a tremendous sword intent erupted wildly from him. In an instant, the swirling leaves in the sky, under the control of his sword intent, transformed into countless streaks of sword light, charging towards where Yi Chun stood. Controlled by Fong Ming, these sword lights made from sword leaves emitted a blinding brilliance like the scorching sun, causing the entire space to flicker with a white haze. It wasn't just the dazzling light. These sword leaves and sword lights carried boundless lethality. As they flew towards Yi Chun, they carved the earth with astonishing sword marks tens of feet long. In just a moment, Yi Chun was entirely engulfed within the endless sword light's slaughter. Fang Ming, ranked 39th on the Void Heaven sword ranking, deployed a powerful high-tier sword formation technique with his first move. This technique was so formidable that many sword cultivators in the Void Heaven Sword Valley would not be able to withstand it, and would likely be defeated by Fang Ming in a single exchange. But now, Fang Ming was facing Yi Chun, the top-ranked individual on the Void Heaven sword ranking. Not to mention this high-tier sword formation akin to a mid-grade heavenly martial technique. Even if Fang Ming's sword formation's lethality increased several times over, it would pose no threat to Yi Chun. During the sword fighting tournament, in this middle stage of the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, there were over 2,000 sword cultivators fighting. Naturally, Yi Chun would not waste time on Fang Ming. As Fang Ming's endless sword formation enveloped Yi Chun, the latter, who was trapped within, simply pointed with his finger, and the myriad of sword leaves that had been flying towards him were suddenly controlled by him. In the blink of an eye, they merged together, forming a sword of sword leaves that shot back towards Fang Ming with explosive force. Boom! This sword of sword leaves, unlike the dispersed, countless individual strikes made by Fang Ming earlier, merged into one. It was like a single point of Void Heaven sword chi, piercing through the void with inconceivable speed and reaching Fang Ming in a flash. Fang Ming had not anticipated that his attack would be taken over by Yi Chun. This clearly showed that Yi Chun's understanding of sword intent was much deeper than his, allowing him to wrest control of the sword leaves from him. Seeing the point of Void Heaven sword chi rapidly shooting towards him, Fang Ming's expression changed. He had just prepared to dodge swiftly, but the point of sword light had already sliced through the void and struck him. Bang! With a single move, just one move, Yi Chun sent Fang Ming, ranked 39th on the Void Heaven sword ranking, flying through the air. As Fang Ming was sent reeling, he was shocked to find that half of his Void Heaven sword chi had flown towards Yi Chun. According to the rules of the Void Heaven Sword Valley sword fighting, this Void Heaven sword chi would only fly to the other party when faced with an irresistible and deadly threat. Fang Ming was horrified. The fact that his Void Heaven sword chi flew towards Yi Chun indicated that if this were a real life and death battle, Yi Chun's point of sword light would have already pierced through and killed him instantly. He would have stood no chance against it. Otherwise, his Void Heaven sword chi wouldn't have flown away. Otherwise, he would have had a chance to counter. Not feeling the power of Yi Chun's move, yet being instantly defeated by it, was even more astonishing for Fang Ming. It meant that he had utterly failed to grasp the true potential of Yi Chun's technique before losing. I have lost. Defeated was defeated. At this moment, with half of the Void Heaven sword chi having entered Yi Chun, Fang Ming also felt himself wrapped by a teleportation formation. Fang Ming didn't want to believe it, but he had to admit that his journey in the sword fighting tournament had just begun, and it was already over. Thud! Fang Ming flung his sword from his hand toward Yi Chun, and with a sullen expression, he was teleported away, entering the sword river of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, designated for the defeated. From the moment Fang Ming challenged Yi Chun to Yi Chun defeating him, it all happened in the blink of an eye. The sword cultivators surrounding Yi Chun and Fang Ming, who had been watching the fight, hadn't yet discerned Yi Chun's move before they saw Fang Ming defeated and transported away. Looking at Fang Ming's treasure sword pierced into the ground, many gasped in shock. Meanwhile, Yi Chun, paying no attention to the sword Fang Ming had lost to him on the ground, looked around with a faint smile and asked, "Who's next? Who shall duel with me?" Outside Void Heaven Sword Valley. In the void. At this time, the light screen in the void was mainly displaying fights among the sword cultivators ranked in the top 10 of the Void Heaven sword ranking. And countless martial artists who were spectators had their eyes glued on Yi Chun. Yi Chun had been the first to condense Void Heaven sword chi. They naturally wanted to see how lethal Yi Chun's real sword fighting and sword techniques were. When they saw Yi Chun cross swords with Fang Ming, it was but a fleeting moment, a flash of the sword, and Fang Ming was defeated. Many warriors had already cried out in amazement. For many warriors, it was the first time they had seen Yi Chun make a move. Yi Chun instantly suppressed a sword cultivator ranked in the top echelons. His astonishingly lethal sword formation technique utterly surprised many people. So powerful. This Yi-Chun, although he is only in the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm, it seems that he has cultivated his sword technique to an extremely profound level. His natural talent for sword techniques is formidable, and his combat strength in swordplay is equally formidable. Obviously, he has applied his talent to the cultivation of sword techniques, and did not just rely on his talent to break into the sword fighting tournament. Just the sword technique he used just now would probably rank at the forefront even among high-level sword formations. In the midst of these discussions, Yi-Chun within the light screen continued to engage in sword fighting with other opponents. And as Yi-Chen's sword fighting proceeded, more and more astonished warriors emerged among the spectators, because many warriors shockingly discovered that in the process of defeating more than 30 sword cultivators, Yi-Chun had employed over 10 different high-level sword formations in succession, and with each sword fight, Yi-Chun would defeat his opponent with a single move, one move to defeat one person. In less than a moment, Yi-Chun even eliminated all the sword cultivators within dozens of miles around him. At this point, the sphere of void heaven sword chi around Yi-Chen's body had even surged to a height of over 10,000 feet. On the void heaven sword ranking, the amount of void heaven sword chi for Yi-Chun had reached more than 60 million strands, still firmly holding the first place. The Sword Fighting Tournament. Since the beginning of the sword fighting tournament, the true powerhouses have emerged. As the accumulated void heaven sword chi on each person is continuously taken by victorious competitors, the amount of void heaven sword chi possessed by these true powerhouses has become more and more astonishing. The final battles will be the battles of these real powerhouses, and the majority of sword cultivators will soon be swept away by them. On the void heaven sword ranking, with Yi-Chun at the top, there were also many sword cultivators who saw the number of their void heaven sword chi rapidly increasing, drawing everyone's attention at this time. In the early stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, there are 3 people whose void heaven sword chi numbers are soaring the fastest. Obviously, they have been continuously defeating other sword cultivators without a single loss. In the late stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, Lu Xiaojia, Mo Bailing, Fong Luohan, Xiaofeng, and other favorites to win the championship are likewise sweeping through the other sword cultivators. Good heavens! After defeating more than 20 sword cultivators, Zhang Yao's amount of void heaven sword chi is about to surpass Yi-Chun. In the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, there are many strong competitors, and they have more void heaven sword chi, so the amount Zhang Yao has seized is even more than what Yi-Chun has. That Lu Qingmei is also impressive, having not suffered a single defeat. When the eyes of the spectating warriors moved past the early-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area and the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, many people's gaze returned once again to the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area where Yi-Chun was. In the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, Yi-Chun is unstoppable. After entering the Void Heaven Sword Valley, he was in the southern part of the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, and by now, he has already defeated more than 100 sword cultivators in the south. Besides Yi-Chun, there is another person in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone who is also unstoppable. This person, who previously had an equally astonishing performance in accumulating Void Heaven Sword Chi, is ranked 6th in collecting Void Heaven Sword Chi and hails from the Ice Palace snow plains of the far north. She is Murong Chi-Chi. Yi-Chun is advancing from the south of the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, while Murong Chi-Chi is pressing forward from the north. Both of them, one from the south and one from the north, have defeated all the sword cultivators they encountered. This Murong Chi-Chi's use of advanced sword formations doesn't seem any less powerful than Yi-Chen's. Seeing her composed demeanor suggests she hasn't even resorted to her more formidable techniques. Looking at it this way, in the end, it will probably be Yi-Chun and this Murong Chi-Chi who contend for superiority in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone. Amid the discussions of the martial artists, looking through the light screen towards the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, one could indeed see 2 figures standing out, fighting their way through and proving invincible. One of those figures was indeed Yi-Chun. The other figure was a 17 or 18-year-old girl in green, her face veiled with a light covering, revealing only a pair of exceptionally spirited eyes. What's more, The girl wore a snow fluff headdress, from which hung numerous snowy white beads. This girl in green was none other than the very person the martial artists were discussing fervently, Morong Chichi, from the ice palace snow plains of the far north. The martial artists watching from outside could see through the light screen that in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, both Yi-chan and Morong Chichi were sweeping through the other sword cultivators. As Yi-chan and Morong Chichi continued to defeat opponents in sword fighting, they also sensed that, aside from themselves, there was another person in their sword fighting zone who was constantly increasing their count of Void Heaven Sword Chi. With the aid of the spheres of Void Heaven Sword Chi, it was possible to sense the locations and the status of Void Heaven Sword Chi of all opponents within the sword fighting zone. When the number of sword cultivators in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone had dwindled to just a few hundred, their sensing of this formidable opponent became even more distinct. At this moment, within the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, Yi-chan and Morong Chichi were still more than 2,000 li apart. The Ice Palace Snow Plains? Morong Chichi. Yi-chan looked up at the Void Heaven Sword ranking, finding the name of the one he sensed accumulating Void Heaven Sword Chi at a rapid pace in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone, defeating other sword cultivators just like him. At the same time, Morong Chichi seemed to sense something and cast her gaze toward the top position of the Void Heaven Sword ranking. The girl's eyes sparkled faintly. So, the other person in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-stage sword fighting zone sweeping through others and seizing their sword chi is Yi-chan, ranked first. Interesting, truly interesting. Defeating this Yi-chan, I could take half of his Void Heaven Sword Chi. Perhaps, without needing to go to other sword fighting zones, I might climb to the first place just here. Since that's the case, I should see just how formidable this Yi-chan really is. After murmuring to herself, the girl ignored the other sword cultivators and, sensing Yi-chan's location, she burst forth directly towards him. It seems that Morong Chichi, even when facing Yi-chan ranked first, is quite confident in her ability to defeat him. Chapter 330. The Pinnacle Duel. Look fast. It looks like Morong Chichi is heading straight for Yi-chan. Could it be that she intends to challenge him directly? When they saw Morong Chichi in the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area no longer fighting with other sword cultivators, but instead heading straight towards Yi-chan's location, many outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley who were paying attention to both Yi-chan and Morong Chichi cried out in surprise. It was no wonder they were astonished. Yi-chan and Morong Chichi were the only two out of the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area who had broken into the top 10 of the Void Heaven sword rankings. And both of them had fought their way through other sword cultivators in the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area without a single defeat. One was slaughtering all around the south side of the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, and the other was sweeping through the competitors on the north side. If these two were to actually start fighting with swords, it would undoubtedly be the most pinnacle confrontation in the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area. In other sword fighting areas, those truly ranked in the forefront amongst sword cultivator experts seemed, almost by some agreement, still busy eliminating the weaker sword cultivators, as if they were saving the real confrontations for last. Now, Yi-chan, who had secured first place in the earlier contest of condensing Void Heaven Sword Chi, and Morong Chichi, who was in 6th place, were still at the 1st and 7th positions even after several hours of sword fighting. It was natural that a direct fight between such two would attract countless gazes. She really is charging towards Yi-chan. Morong Chichi, from the far northern Ice Palace snowfield, that place is one of the most mysterious in the vast lands. By her demeanor, it seems she is confident she can defeat Yi-chan. As Morong Chichi flew past countless sword cultivators she had encountered on her way towards Yi-chan, she was mere tens of miles away from him. Even more people noticed her actions. Daring to directly challenge Yi-chan, the top-ranked contender, this is going to be interesting. Seeing that Morong Chichi truly dared to seek out Yi-chan for sword fighting, countless spectators outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley became excited. Even Elder Shao Supreme Elder and other heavenly saints like Mu Qingqing had a flash of light in their eyes. Previously, Yi-chan has not met any opponents who could match him, and even his most powerful high-level sword formation, the Deathstorm sword formation, has not been witnessed in use. Perhaps, this Morong Chichi will force Yi-chan to reveal his true strength. as countless onlookers outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley were focused on Yichan and Murong Chichi. In the Mid-Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting area, Yichan also noticed the figure rushing towards him. Murong Chichi? You want to fight me directly with swords? As Yichan sensed the figure flying straight towards him, and once the figure was over 30 miles away, within the range of his divine sense, he too took flight, moving to meet Murong Chichi. A duel with swords? Yichan obviously would not shy away. He was ready to accompany her. Besides, he was somewhat curious about Murong Chichi from the far northern Ice Palace snowfield. This was the first time he had encountered anyone from the Ice Palace snowfield. Yichan had heard from Heavenly Saint Long Xian that Heavenly Saint Di Kong, who had left a mysterious legacy in his family and then vanished without a trace, had appeared in the Ice Palace snowfield over 300 years ago. Perhaps, from Murong Chichi, he could learn something about the Ice Palace snowfield and get news about Heavenly Saint Di Kong. Boom! Boom! One came flying directly, and the other went out to meet the challenge. In but an instant, Yichan had covered the tens of miles and stopped in the void, 17 or 18 yards apart from Murong Chichi, facing each other. Yichan. Murong Chichi looked at the young man in front of her, whose tall figure and extraordinary presence unconsciously made her nod her head. Yichan smiled and turned his attention to the young girl in front of him. The girl, veiled in a thin layer, revealing only a pair of lively eyes and wearing a snow fur headdress, struck him as quite mysterious. Murong Chichi? From the far northern Ice Palace snowfield? I have long heard of that place. One of my predecessors, known as Heavenly Saint Di Kong, once went there, and his whereabouts have been unknown since then. I wonder if Miss Murong has heard of him. Heavenly Saint Di Kong. Murong Chichi hadn't expected to seek out Yichan for a sword duel only for the young man to directly inquire about someone to her. Moreover, the name Di Kong felt familiar to her, as if she had heard it somewhere before, yet she couldn't recall where. Seeing Yichan looking expectantly at her, Murong Chichi smiled lightly. Yichan, I am here to fight you with swords, not to solve your puzzles. After you have overcome my sword, then you can ask me, she said. As she spoke, Murong Chichi shook the azure-colored sword in her hand lightly, and the scabbard flew out, stuck in the ground, revealing the cold, gleaming, precious sword in her hands. Then, Murong Chichi raised the tip of her treasured sword, making a starting gesture for sword fighting directly at Yichan. Yichan hadn't expected the girl to be so straightforward, reluctant to talk further, ready to engage him in sword fighting. I must defeat her before I can even ask her? Yichan chuckled. Then let's start with a sword duel. With a swoosh, Yichan's black fire sword together with its sheath flew out and planted itself in the ground. Yichan held the black fire sword with the tip pointing downward. Since Miss Murong has said so, then let's begin the duel. Make your move. Boom. 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 The young male and female sword cultivators, one wielding a heavy sword radiating black fire and shimmering light, and the other handling a bright treasure sword overflowing with cold light, stood facing each other. In an instant, the freely bursting sword intents began to surge around them. By this time, Yichan had already defeated hundreds of sword cultivators. The sphere of void heaven sword chi around him had surged to a height of over 13,000 zhang. The quantity of Yichan's void heaven sword chi had even reached more than 80 million strands. Although Murong Chichi was somewhat weaker than Yichan, she had also eliminated hundreds of sword cultivators. The sphere of void heaven sword chi around her was soaring more than 6,000 zhang high, and the number of her void heaven sword chi strands was also over 40 million. Regardless of who won, they could seize half of the other's remaining void heaven sword chi, plus all the void heaven sword chi they had won from other people. Once the outcome of their sword duel was decided, one of them would have a quantity of void heaven sword chi exceeding 100 million. A quantity of void heaven sword chi exceeding 100 million, if converted into true chi, would absolutely surpass the amount of true chi of late-stage Spirit Sea Realm practitioners, enabling these Spirit Sea Realm martial artists to assault even higher realms. Though the void heaven sword chi could be absorbed into their bodies only after 3 more days, The spectacle of two individuals encircled by intimidating spheres of sword chi preparing for combat naturally drew the attention of countless people. Even other sword cultivators in the mid-stage Spirit Sea sword fighting area, who had not yet been eliminated, flew towards where Yi Chan and Murong Chichi were to watch the battle from a distance, let alone the warriors watching from outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley. Many of the warriors observing from outside the Sword Valley had already risen from their meditation in the void, looking towards Yi Chan and Murong Chichi. In the midst of countless gazes, Yi Chan and Murong Chichi looked at each other for a few moments, then moved simultaneously. Unlike others who directly channeled their sword intents in their duels, the two of them fought directly with their treasure swords, as if they were practicing basic sword techniques that sword cultivators learn at the very beginning. But to the horror of many genuine swordsmen witnessing their swordplay, it seemed that within their sword skills, subtle essence akin to the ultimate form of sword intents was diffusing. Clang, 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 clang. Each clash of swords between Yi Chan and Murong Chichi, though appearing to be ordinary strikes, sent out shocking bursts of chi when the lethal force dispersed into the surroundings, even cleaving hundreds of zhonglong, enormous sword marks deep into the ground beneath them. By their 10th move, it was as if with each turn of their sword tips, the infinite sword intents in their hands were fully unleashed. The beginning was a test of swordsmanship, and also a study of the opponent's techniques. But now they had both begun using their true elimination moves. When the infinite sword intents were completely released, Yi Chan and Murong Chichi stood holding their treasure swords, and within a few hundred zhang around them in the void, sword intents surged and exploded. As their 11th strike collided, the power of the sword intents in their hands soared to the level of a high-tier sword formation. Yi Chen's technique was the powerful high-tier sword formation he had used before in the square, the Deathstorm sword formation, when facing 3 opponents at once. As for Murong Chichi, her azure treasure sword pointed in the void, and the entire space erupted with snowflake-shaped sword lights. These snowflakes descended from the heavens, the sword intents bursting from them by no means inferior to Yi Chen's Deathstorm sword formation. My heavens! They were just crossing swords a moment ago, and now they've erupted their sword intents to such a level in an instant. Seeing Yi Chan unleash the Deathstorm sword formation, creating a sky-filled sword blade storm that devoured everything, the countless martial artists spectating from outside were stunned. They hadn't expected Yi Chan to use such a powerful sword formation so suddenly. Clearly, it was likely that Yi Chan, realizing Murong Chichi's formidable capabilities, was no longer holding back. Indeed, as anticipated, when Yi Chen's all-devouring sword blade storm furiously attacked Murong Chichi, her sky-filled snowflake sword intent formation directly collided with Yi Chen's death storm with a thunderous impact. Boom! 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 Like a cataclysmic storm meeting a devouring snowstorm, the two extraordinarily powerful high-tier sword formations collided, plunging the whole world into a terrifying frenzy of lethal force. This terrifying lethality even caused the void to darken, as if the light of the heavens was being consumed and extinguished by this force. And the horrifying explosions of sword intent made the entire mid-stage Spirit Sea sword fighting area shake. The ground where Yi Chan and Murong Chichi stood collapsing outward for tens of thousands of zhang in all directions. This scene even caused many other sword cultivators watching nearby to change color dramatically and retreat explosively. The explosions raised a magnificent dust storm that obscured the figures of Yi Chan and Murong Chichi. It was not until dozens of explosions had passed that everyone saw Yi Chan and Murong Chichi both bursting upwards into the heavens almost simultaneously. And at the same moment, Murong Chichi sheathed her treasure sword and extended her fair palm gracefully, revealing a dancing white snowflake in her hand. As the white snowflake appeared, it instantly caused the entire void to chill. The heavenly saints on the outside, especially the formidable rotary pill sword cultivators, cried out in unison upon seeing the white snowflake in Murong Chichi's hand. A Law Sword Seed. This is the water element, Law Sword Seed. Chapter 331 Ice and Fire. The heavenly saint and the powerful rotating pill sword cultivators, with their extremely sharp vision, could naturally recognize what the white snowflake in Murong Chichi's hand was. It was just a snowflake a few inches in size that, after appearing, even overshadowed the killing power of a high-level sword formation, making the whole void feel icy cold. Through the light screen, all the strong participants could sense in the void where Yi-chan and Murong Chi-Chi were standing, endless law power and sword intent converging towards the white snowflake in Murong Chi-Chi's hand, feeling a shocking sword light beginning to crazily grow within the white snowflake. What else could overpower the killing power of a high-level sword formation if not a Law Sword Seed? The Law Sword Seed is the highest achievement Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators can reach in practicing sword techniques, and its power is far beyond the existence of high-level sword formations. Many rotating pills might not be able to comprehend the Law Sword Seed. In previous Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting competitions, those who comprehended the Law Sword Seed were few and far between, even over the span of hundreds of thousands of years. The fact that Murong Chi-Chi had suddenly used the Law Sword Seed technique caught all the powerful individuals by surprise. No wonder this Murong Chi-Chi dared to directly challenge Yi-chan. It turns out she has actually comprehended the Law Sword Seed to this level. The Water Law Sword Seed, one of the 5 most powerful Law Sword Seeds, and looking at the snowflake that Murong Chi-Chi is manifesting with the Law Sword Seed, it's clear that her Water Law Sword Seed has been comprehended from cold ice. With this Law Sword Seed's killing power, Yi-chan is in danger. Previously, when Murong Chi-Chi dared to challenge Yi-chan, the top-ranked individual of the Void Heaven sword ranking, many people were not optimistic about Murong Chi-Chi. After all, it was widely whispered that Yi-chan possessed a very powerful high-level sword formation. But now, with Murong Chi-Chi suddenly using a move that surpassed a high-level sword formation, unleashing the killing power of the Law Sword Seed, this had made quite a few people start to worry about Yi-chan instead. If Yi-chan had only reached the level of a high-level sword formation in his sword techniques, then in front of Murong Chi-Chi, he was undoubtedly doomed to lose. What can be done? From the sidelines, Mu Qingqing listened to the countless strong participants discussing and, when looking at Yi-chan again, her beautiful eyes were also filled with worry. She had seen Yi-chan's moves, and his most formidable one was the high-level Deathstorm sword formation. Originally, Mu Qingqing thought that the incredibly powerful Deathstorm high-level sword formation was enough to let Yi-chan sweep through all his opponents. What she didn't expect was that in this sword fighting competition, there would be a Murong Chi-Chi, someone who had mastered the Law Sword Seed. The sword formation that filled the sky with snowflakes had previously clashed with Yi-chan's Deathstorm sword formation, and they were evenly matched. Now Murong Chi-Chi had once again deployed the Law Sword Seed, taking her battle prowess to the next level. In such a situation, if Yi-chan didn't have something up his sleeve, he would likely be defeated straight away. If there were something up his sleeve outside of Void Heaven Sword Valley, Mu Qingqing would believe that Yi-chan would certainly have a countermeasure, but within Void Heaven Sword Valley, where only sword techniques could be utilized, what could Yi-chan, who had only cultivated his sword intent to the level of a high-level sword formation, use to defend against Murong Chi-Chi's Law Sword Seed strike? Thinking of how Yi-chan had been leading and dominating the #1 spot on the Void Heaven sword ranking, to lose to Murong Chi-Chi would mean he would be directly stripped of half of his Void Heaven sword chi, and he would be eliminated from the competition, no longer having the chance to face other sword cultivators. Naturally, this was an outcome Mu Qingqing was unwilling to accept. But what could she do if she wasn't willing to accept it? The Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament was a competition of sword techniques. Yi-chan, who had only mastered his sword intent to the level of high-level sword formations, was indeed no match in sword techniques compared to Murong Chi-Chi, who had achieved the Law Sword Seed. It's over. This Yi-chan is going to lose. Mu Qingqing was worried, but many other experts who had seen Murong Chi-Chi's moves were absolutely certain that Yi-chan would soon be defeated. They feared that the moment Murong Chi-Chi released the killing power of her Law Sword Seed towards Yi-chan, it would be the time of Yi-chan's defeat. As countless gazes converged on the white snowflake in Murong Chi-Chi's hand, they were shocked by her new move. In the mid-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword duel, Yi-chan looked at the snowflake in Murong Chi-Chi's hand, which brimmed with an astonishing sword-killing power in an instant, and he too felt a tremor in his eyes. Law Sword Seed. Yi-chan hadn't expected that this girl in front of him had also comprehended sword techniques to such an extent. While Yi Chun was taken aback, Murong Chi-Chi with a thin veil over her face looked towards Yi Chun, and at the same time, her light laughter came through. Yi Chun, your high-level sword formation earlier, which was on par with my snowfall shocking heaven move, has already surprised me. Now, let my law sword seed skill World of Ice Seal completely defeat you. Don't worry, afterwards. I will defeat everyone else in the same way, and let them all join you in that eliminated sword river. In Murong Chi-Chi's light laughter, the white snowflake in her hand suddenly erupted with a sky-shattering killing power. Earlier, the white snowflake had merely cooled the entire void, but in an instant afterward, the air of the entire void surged with ice swords. In a flash, the whole void seemed as if it was about to be sealed in ice. Seeing Murong Chi-Chi use her law sword seed skill, many people couldn't bear to look at Yi Chun anymore. They didn't want to see the immensely powerful Yi Chun lose to the girl. Just as Murong Chi-Chi's light laughter had not yet dissipated, and as the white snowflake surged with law sword seed's killing power, about to seal the entire void and utterly defeat Yi Chun, Yi Chun's light laughter also sounded, "World of Ice Seal? It is indeed powerful. But is this move going to defeat me? Miss Murong, I still wanted to ask you about the extreme North Ice Palace Plains. How could I just admit defeat like this?" Boom! In the midst of Yi Chun's light laughter, everyone saw that as the endless ice-sealing killing power approached to freeze Yi Chun. In his palm, something else emerged. An extremely fiery red dot of fire seed. The moment this fire seed appeared, it suddenly burst forth with a sky-high heat. This astonishing heat even made the cool void burn hot, shattering the endless ice swords that were freezing towards Yi Chun. The instant they saw the fire seed, under her veil, Mu Qingqing's mouth opened wide in shock. Law Sword Seed. You have also cultivated to the Law Sword Seed? And it's the fire seed from the 5 major Law Sword Seeds. In absolute astonishment, Yi Chun gently smiled. That's right. It's the fire seed Law Sword Seed. In his light laughter, that dot of fire seed in his hand explosively surged upward, instantly forming a region of sky-burning fire swords in the void. These sky-burning fire swords shattered the ice swords around Yi Chun and stood off in the distance against Murong Chi-Chi's void heaven ice swords. Clearly, the killing power of Yi Chun's Law Sword Seed was in no way inferior to Murong Chi-Chi's World of Ice Seal skill, and it even had a feeling of being slightly superior. Chapter 332 Ice and Snow Jade Pendant. Another Law Sword Seed. Yi Chun has actually cultivated to the point of mastering a Law Sword Seed. Just as Yi Chun seemed on the brink of defeat, all the powerful experts had not expected that Yi Chun would also deploy a Law Sword Seed technique and manage to reverse his disadvantage in one fell swoop, directly confronting Murong Chi-Chi head-on once again. This was completely beyond everyone's expectations. It made numerous martial artists scream out in shock. In a sword fighting tournament, the appearance of one person with control over a Law Sword Seed was already unbelievable. Now, in the Spirit Sea Realm mid-level sword fighting section, 2 such mighty individuals had appeared at once. This naturally made countless people unable to believe their eyes. A millennial grand event. It seems that this sword fighting tournament, with the participation of members from the Heavenly Sacred Palace, calling upon sword cultivator powerhouses from various regions to join, has not only caused a surge in the number of fighters to the level of a millennial event, but has also elevated the talents of the sword cultivators to the same level. This tournament, with Yi Chun and Murong Chi-Chi, and possibly others with formidable techniques. This scene will definitely go down in the thousands of years of history of the Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament. In the void, upon seeing Yi Chun unleashing the fire-attributed Law Sword Seed and creating a vast expanse of sky-burning fire sword, confronting Murong Chi-Chi's sky-filling ice-sealing sword directly, Elder Shao Supreme Elder, who was equally worried about Yi Chun's defeat, breathed a sigh of relief, with a sense of admiration. Elder Shao Supreme Elder's heart relaxed, and standing beside him, Mu Qingqing was filled with incredulity and ecstasy in her beautiful eyes. The young girl had not at all expected that Yi Chun still had hidden techniques, capable of countering even a move of the Law Sword Seed's caliber, and had himself attained understanding of the Law Sword Seed level.
Yi Chun.
Mu Qingqing was so excited she couldn't even speak. She remembered bringing Yi Chun into the Tai sword sect, going towards the divine sword to cultivate, where Yi Chun hadn't even fully mastered the high-tier sword formations, and not much time had passed. Yet not only had Yi Chun mastered a dozen high-level sword formations, but he had also grasped the law sword seed that surpassed high-tier sword formations. This rate of cultivation, this talent for comprehension, was unheard of to Mu Qingqing, making the young girl overjoyed to no end. Yi Chen's innate potential of the soul was already incredible, and his swordsmanship achievements were even more outstanding. Coupled with this rate of cultivation and comprehension, Mu Qingqing had earlier said that Yi Chun, going to the first holy temple of the heavenly sacred palace, would contend with the true geniuses there. Now, it seems that it's not just about contending anymore. If Yi Chun were to continue cultivating, he would easily overpower the geniuses of the first holy temple and even ascend directly to the heavenly saint mountain of the heavenly sacred palace, achieving great renown. Mu Qingqing couldn't help but look forward to seeing Yi Chun enter the heavenly sacred palace, the first holy temple, and shake those arrogant geniuses to their core. After all, this was the young man she, Mu Qingqing, had invited to heavenly sacred palace. At this thought, Mu Qingqing's little head rose with pride. Outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, among the observing martial artists, the area for martial artists from the Southern Territory. Previously, countless experts discussed how Yi Chun would be defeated, and many warriors from the Southern Territory had never heard of the Law Sword Seed, but through the light screen they could feel how formidable Morong Chichi, whom Yi Chun was battling, was. At that time, they were already so suppressed that they dared not speak. After all, Yi Chun was representing the Southern Territory, leading all the way on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. If Yi Chun were to be defeated, and moreover, on the first day of the 3-day sword fighting event, it would be a blow to everyone from the Southern Territory. Now, Yi Chun, whom the people of the Southern Territory admired immensely, had not been defeated. Despite facing the Law Sword Seed technique that astonished and moved even the powerful Dan sword cultivators from the Heavenly Sacred, Yi Chun managed to hold on once more, directly confronting Morong Chichi and gaining the upper hand. This caused the previously suppressed sword cultivators from the Southern Territory to be unable to contain their excitement, trembling with agitation throughout their bodies. In the end, all their excitement turned into earth-shaking shouts. Yi Chun!
Yi Chun!
The shouts from the Southern Territory also affected the other martial artists outside Void Heaven Sword Valley. Thinking of Yi Chen's performance while condensing Void Heaven Sword Chi, remembering how unstoppable he was when fighting against numerous sword cultivators, and now seeing Yi Chun face a Law Sword Seed move with his own incredible Law Sword Seed technique, other martial artists also began to shout loudly, Yi Chun! Yi Chun! They were rooting for Yi Chun. They were cheering for the strongest name on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. The shouts outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley stirred the heart, and within the valley, in the mid-level sword fighting zone of Spirit Sea Realm, Yi Chun and Morong Chichi, who had both unleashed their Law Sword Seed moves, finally began their battle again. Sword fighting, that's about deciding who is superior. Even if both sides used Law Sword Seed techniques, there is still a hierarchy. Boom! 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 On Morong Chichi's side, seeing her Void Heaven Ice sword shattered into fragments by Yi Chen's sky-burning fire sword, the young girl wasn't angry. Instead, her eyes shone with the thrill of finding a worthy opponent. Yi Chun, you've surprised me once again. Even in my extreme northern land, in the Ice and Snow God Palace, where I cultivated, no Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivator has managed to develop a Law Sword Seed like me. I thought that coming to the sword fighting tournament would likely leave me disappointed. But this time, witnessing your Law Sword Seed, my trip to the central region has not been in vain. Now, let's see whose Law Sword Seed is more powerful. Chapter 333. In Morong Chichi's voice full of fighting spirit, her sky-filling ice swords suddenly transformed, all becoming deep blue water swords. Then, the sky full of deep blue water swords crazily inundated towards Yi Chen's sky-burning fire swords. Ice could be melted by fire. However, water could extinguish fierce flames. Upon seeing that Yi Chen's Law Sword Seed was of the fire-based sword, Morong Chichi instantly shifted her Frozen World Sword technique to the original form of her water-based law sword seed. As those deep blue water swords flooded towards the sky, burning fire swords in the void, Yi-chan, hearing Murong Chi-Chi's renewed challenge, his eyes sparkled with precision. A contest of who's stronger? Let's do it. The 5 major law sword seeds can mutually counteract each other. But that doesn't mean water can always overcome fire. Fire can also burn everything to ashes. In Yi-chen's voice, up in void heaven, the sky-filled sky burning fire swords, he commanded faced the endlessly covering and assaulting deep blue water swords, and suddenly whipped up surging flames. What Murong Chi-Chi was even more unaware of was that as Yi-chan executed his fire-based law sword seed technique, deep within his divine soul, the metal, wood, water, fire, earth 5 sword light seeds also lit up brightly. This was the result of Yi-chen's cultivation of the divine art, Baiming's secret tome, the second-level Void Heaven's 5 stages diagram, his mastery of the 5 major law sword seeds. Everyone thought that Yi-chan had only cultivated one type of law sword seed, unaware that he possessed all 5 major law sword seeds, which continuously countered and complemented each other. When the 5 sword light seeds lit up at the same time, the sword Dao killing force of the sky-burning fire swords that Yi-chan unleashed suddenly soared to an unbelievable level. It was truly like burning up the void, a myriad of swords piercing through the sky. Looking towards void heaven, the sky full of deep blue water swords deployed by Murong Chi-Chi were already stirring up a world filled with infinite killing force. But once the true power of Yi-chen's sword Dao technique was revealed, those numerous sky-burning fire swords seemed to burst ceaselessly downward in the void, slashing madly. Sky-filled sky-burning fire swords, a sky-filled barrage, a sky-filled mad slashing. This was not just the power of the fire-based law sword seed but also the sword origin killing force. Before such a powerful force, Murong Chi-Chi's deep blue water swords, before they could smother and assault a single one of Yi-chen's fire swords, were utterly destroyed by the countless bombarding and wildly slashing fire swords. When all the deep blue water swords were caught amidst the descending barrage of sky-burning fire swords, they were wiped out in an instant. The entire void was left with none of Murong Chi-Chi's water-based law sword seed's power, only the flames of Yi-chen's sky-burning fire swords flickering everywhere. In the end, even the white snowflakes that Murong Chi-Chi had initially cast had become utterly dim. At this moment, if Yi-chan were to launch his fire swords towards Murong Chi-Chi, she would be directly eliminated from the competition. This scene brought silence to the countless martial artists watching inside and outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley. They had thought that Yi-chan and Murong Chi-Chi, both using law sword seed techniques, would continue fighting intensely for a while, but no one expected that under the head-to-head clash of the true law sword seed killing forces, Murong Chi-Chi was utterly no match for Yi-chan. Clearly, Yi-chan had a deeper understanding of the law sword seed than Murong Chi-Chi. At this moment, Murong Chi-Chi, looking at the now dim snowflakes in her hands, then towards the sky-filled sky-burning fire swords Yi-chan had unleashed in the void, her eyes subtly moved. The girl knew why Yi-chan had not completely defeated her yet. Perhaps Yi-chan was still waiting to hear from her about the news of the snowfields of the Ice Snow Divine Palace in the extreme north, and about the heavenly Saint Dekong he was inquiring about. With this thought, the girl sighed softly. Then, Murong Chi-Chi gently pinched her fingers and lifted the light veil on her face. Looking at Yi-chan, "Yi-chan, I have lost. I am a disciple of the Ice Snow Divine Palace in the extreme north. When I set out, I had an agreement with the people of the Divine Palace, that if no one at the Central Region sword-fighting competition defeated me, I would not reveal my face. Now that I have been defeated, it is also time for me to return to the Ice Snow Divine Palace in 3 days. The heavenly Saint Dekong you're inquiring about, I have a vague impression, but I don't remember much. When I return, I will investigate for you. This Ice Snow Jade Pendant is a token of the Ice Snow Divine Palace in the extreme north. In the future, when you travel to the extreme north, you can use this pendant to find me, and I will inform you of everything I have investigated." After Murong Chi-Chi spoke, she flicked her finger, and a snow-white, ice crystal-like jade pendant, engraved with the endless patterns of the Ice Palace and tied with a golden thread and a red cord, shot straight towards Yichan. Ice Snow Divine Palace?
Ice Snow Jade Pendant.
Yichen's heart stirred, and he caught the jade pendant in his hand. Looking at Morong Chichi as she removed her veil, Yichan saw that she had a delicate and slightly chubby face, making her appear even more tender and endearing, and without the veil, her spirited eyes had an inexplicable allure. Perhaps if it had not been for Yichen's frequent company with Jiang Yao, anyone else who glanced at Morong Chichi's true face would have been deeply attracted. Seeing Yichan sizing her up, Morong Chichi smiled gently but did not talk further. Instead, she leapt towards the sky-burning fire sword above the void heaven. Having been defeated by Yichan and with no other moves to counterattack, Morong Chichi naturally would not waste any more time. Having lost to Yichan, she was completely convinced in her defeat. As Morong Chichi leapt towards the sky-burning fire sword and touched it, the Su Tian sword chi light group on her body sensed her defeat, and a great portion of the void heaven sword chi surged explosively towards Yichan. Simultaneously, Morong Chichi's body flashed with light and she was teleported to the elimination area of the void heaven sword valley. Within the sword river, Yichan held the ice snow jade pendant and saw Morong Chichi vanish. He started to admire the straightforward and decisive girl. Ice Snow Divine Palace? Morong Chichi? After I settle down in the heavenly sacred palace, I will make a trip to the Ice Snow Divine Palace in the extreme north. Yichan had to investigate the news about Heavenly Saint Dekong, which ultimately meant he would make a journey to the extreme north, as Dekong had left a secret realm in Yichan's family grounds and had a great favor with him. Coupled with the ties with the little monkey, Yichan was, of course, going to inquire about Heavenly Saint Dekong's news. As Yichan murmured to himself, the void heaven sword chi that had surged explosively from Morong Chichi had fully entered Yichen's void heaven sword chi light group. With the combined forces of the two void heaven sword chi light groups, the one surrounding Yichan shot up to a height of over 18,000 zhang. And the number of Yichen's void heaven sword chi had reached an astonishing number of 123,920,000. The battle between Yichan and Morong Chichi could not be seen by the other two sword fighting areas, the early and the late Spirit Sea sword fighting areas. However, when the number of Yichen's void heaven sword chi changed again and showed a number of 123,920,000 on top of the first place of the void heaven sword ranking, all the sword cultivators in the other two areas were thoroughly astonished. Chapter 334. Jiang Yao's Swordsmanship. These sword cultivators were constantly keeping an eye on the rankings on the void heaven sword ranking, as well as the changes in the amount of void heaven sword chi held by those ranked at the top. The number of Yichen's void heaven sword chi had previously been over 80 million, but now it had suddenly increased by over 40 million, reaching the enormous tally of over 120 million. Even without witnessing the battle between Yichan and Morong Chichi, everyone understood that Yichan must have defeated a powerful cultivator with a substantial amount of void heaven sword chi to have such an immediate and significant increase. Seeing Morong Chichi's ranking drop from 7th and then being eliminated, all the sword cultivators instantly realized Yichan had eliminated another formidable figure in the mid-Spirit Sea battle zone, Morong Chichi, a battle between two top 10 powerhouses on the void heaven sword ranking. Now, for the first time, a top 10 powerhouse was eliminated, which was a shock to all other sword cultivators. If these cultivators knew the details of the battle between Yichan and Morong Chichi, they would be even more astounded. This was not just a battle between top 10 powerhouses but also involved a clash at the level of Law Sword Seeds. Even Morong Chichi, who had unleashed his Law Sword Seed, was defeated by Yichan. If the other powerhouses on the Void Heaven Sword ranking knew this, they would probably be unable to remain calm right now. One of the top 10 has been eliminated. Morong Chichi is out. Having taken Morong Chichi's Void Heaven Sword Chi, now Yichen's count has soared to over 100 million in quantity. It seems I need to seek out stronger cultivators with more Void Heaven Sword Chi to battle. Initially, I planned to fight later, but now it looks like I should snatch up some Void Heaven Sword Chi first, to increase my amount and attract more attention. In the late Spirit Sea battle zone, Mo Biling, Upon seeing Yi Chan still occupying first place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking and his Void Heaven Sword chi breaking past 100 million, his eyes sparked with determination. He then ignored those nearby opponents with lesser amounts of Void Heaven Sword chi and, after sizing up the globe of Void Heaven Sword chi around him, shot toward a sword cultivator nearby who had over 20 million Void Heaven Sword chi. Mo Biling was not the only one. After seeing Yi Chan eliminate Morong Chi and his Void Heaven Sword chi explosively increase, other sword cultivator powerhouses also truly began the battle of the strong. In the early Spirit Sea battle zone, two youngsters with the most Void Heaven Sword chi directly clashed with each other. In the late Spirit Sea battle zone, Xiao Feng, ranked 8th, immediately started his battle with Fang Luohan, ranked 6th. Ling Yu, ranked 9th, likewise challenged Shenyuan Wuhan, ranked 10th. As the true battles of the strong erupted, the rankings on the Void Heaven Sword ranking also began to shift dramatically. With the battles proceeding, Luo Qiancheng from the Eastern Star Desolate Islands in the early Spirit Sea battle zone defeated another young sword cultivator from the central region, causing his ranking to surge and elevate him to the 9th position. In the late Spirit Sea battle zone, in the battle between Xiao Feng and Fang Luohan, Xiao Feng was defeated, and Fang Luohan's Void Heaven Sword chi also explosively increased to over 60 million strands. These battles were intensely fierce, but in the hearts of all the spectators outside of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, none of these battles compared to the sword fight between Yi Chan and Morong Chi in terms of intensity. For none had reached the level where both combatants were of the Law Sword Seed tier like the fight between Yi Chan and Morong Chi. However, these cultivators didn't have to wait long before another earth-shattering battle descended upon the late Spirit Sea battle zone. Following the battle between Yi Chan and Morong Chi, two top-ranking powerhouses on the Void Heaven Sword ranking clashed once more. Zhang Yao, ranked 2nd, encountered a challenge from Lu Xiaojia, ranked 3rd. Before the battle began, Zhang Yao's count of Void Heaven Sword chi had already reached over 80 million strands, while Lu Xiaojia also had over 50 million strands. The victor between the two would be the second person to break past 100 million Void Heaven Sword chi after Yi Chan. This battle attracted countless sword cultivator elites from around the area to watch, including Lu Qingmei, who had been by Zhang Yao's side all along, and even Fang Luohan, who had defeated Xiao Feng, turned his attention to this clash. The countless warriors outside the arena were equally focused on the battle between Zhang Yao and Lu Xiaojia. After all, among the two, Zhang Yao was the powerful girl who, before the sword fighting competition, could defeat the 3 strongest rotating pill experts with a single move, hailed as the invincible rotating pill master. In the gathering of Void Heaven Sword chi, she ranked 2nd, trailing just behind Yi Chan by a slight margin, and also a talented girl who had gathered more than 40 million strands of Void Heaven Sword chi. Everyone wanted to see just how powerful Zhang Yao's true swordsmanship was. The previous challengers to Zhang Yao weren't very strong sword cultivators, but now Lu Xiaojia was the perfect opponent to test the true power of Zhang Yao's swordsmanship. Lu Xiaojia, before the sword fighting competition, was the most favored among the top 6 candidates to win the championship, even momentarily getting more calls to win than Yi Chan. Moreover, in previous battles among the 4th-ranked sword cultivators, Lu Xiaojia had won first place in numerous sword fights, earning him the title of the number 1 sword cultivator of the 4th rank. Such a youth's battle with Zhang Yao was, of course, a spectacle that commanded great attention, and when the two truly began their sword fight, the scene of the battle shocked countless people immensely. The level of surprise was by no means lesser than the battle between Yi Chan and Morong Chi. In the battle, both Zhang Yao and Lu Xiaojia initially used high-level sword formations. After dozens of moves, Lu Xiaojia still could not defeat Zhang Yao. At this point, Lu Xiaojia finally revealed his trump card, one that nobody knew before the sword fighting competition. Like Morong Chi, Lu Xiaojia had also comprehended a type of law sword seed. The one he comprehended was known for its strongest offensive power among the 5 major law sword seeds, the metal law sword seed. When Lu Xiaojia used the metal law sword seed, Lu Qingmei and Fang Luohan, who were watching the battle, were incredibly astonished, and the countless warriors outside the arena exclaimed in shock. Indeed, unbelievably, After Yichun and Murong Chichi, this sword fighting competition saw the emergence of the third person to master a law sword seed. What's more, this person who mastered the law sword seed finally emerged among the Central Region's sword cultivators. This sent the warriors from the Central Region, who made up the largest group of spectators, into complete frenzy. However, before these Central Region warriors could enjoy their excitement for long, the battle between Lu Xiaojia and Zhang Yao shocked them once again. Because even after Lu Xiaojia took out the metal law sword seed, known for its strongest defensive power, he still couldn't defeat Zhang Yao. During the battle, Zhang Yao brought out a set of swordsmanship that no warrior had ever seen. A mystical sword technique, bolstered by the divine illusion of an icy blue phoenix. Even more so, in the end, with this sword technique, Zhang Yao completely defeated Lu Xiaojia, who had used the metal law sword seed. Divine Arts. When the last move from Zhang Yao activated, it instantly drew upon all the power of the Endless Void, causing Lu Xiaojia's metal law sword seed power to collapse completely. Between the heavens, the sky was filled with Zhang Yao's endless icy blue sword shadows. Several formidable heavenly saints who were watching from outside the arena cried out, "Divine Arts!" These heavenly saints recognized that Zhang Yao's sword technique, which completely shattered the power of the metal law sword seed, was definitely a powerful divine art they had never encountered. Divine Arts. Following the law sword seeds, they actually witnessed sword technique divine arts in the sword fighting competition. This was absolutely unprecedented in the thousands of years of the sword fighting competition. Chapter 335. The Proud Son of Heaven. Who can compete? Yichun defeated Murong Chichi, who controlled the law sword seed, and in the comprehension of the law sword seed, he had reached an inconceivable level. And this stunningly beautiful girl, Zhang Yao, who had always been with Yichun and was obviously deeply connected to him, also defeated Lu Xiaojia, who controlled the law sword seed, and even showcased a type of divine swordsmanship. This, of course, shocked the heavenly saints immensely and startled countless warriors into exclaiming with awe. Even when Zhang Yao completely defeated Lu Xiaojia, eliminating him from the competition, and Zhang Yao's Void Heaven Sword Chi suddenly surged to over 120 million, almost tying with Yichun for the top rank, the entire Void Heaven Sword Valley's three major sword-fighting areas fell deadly silent at once as countless sword cultivators, watching the Void Heaven Sword ranking, were struck dumb. Because they clearly saw that, at the same time Zhang Yao's Void Heaven Sword Chi surged, Lu Xiaojia's ranking plummeted from third to nowhere to be found. Certainly, Lu Xiaojia had been eliminated by Zhang Yao. The previously favored champion, Lu Xiaojia, had been eliminated. Even the third-ranked had been eliminated. This was simply the highest-ranked person to be eliminated since the start of the Spirit Sea Realm's sword-fighting competition. This, of course, frightened countless people. And as the news of Zhang Yao defeating Lu Xiaojia spread throughout the Spirit Sea Realm's later-stage sword-fighting zones, hearing that Lu Xiaojia had unleashed a tremendously powerful metal-based law sword seed only to be eliminated by Zhang Yao shocked all sword cultivators. The law sword seed. Oh, that was definitely the strongest swordsmanship a sword cultivator at the Spirit Sea Realm could achieve. With that being eliminated, who else could win against Zhang Yao in swordsmanship? Even Mo Biling, who also harbored the technique of the law sword seed, turned pale at once upon hearing this news and couldn't speak for a long time. Mo Biling had always thought that his law sword seed technique would be an incredible trump card in this sword-fighting competition. He had not expected that Lu Xiaojia would have the same trump card. Even less did he expect, now, someone with this trump card Lu Xiaojia had lost. This meant that he, Mo Biling, would very likely be defeated by Zhang Yao as well. Although the mastery of the law sword seed varied from high to low, Mo Biling felt that his law sword seed was likely stronger than Lu Xiaojia's, but now he no longer dared to claim that he would surely take the first place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. The first place in the sword-fighting competition. Because before him stood Zhang Yao, a girl he could not fathom at all, and Yichun, a youth he also could not see through. These two were definitely the biggest obstacles on his path to the championship, and perhaps insurmountable ones at that. Mo Biling was shocked to his core, yet he still clung to his last shred of unwillingness to concede. But others no longer harbored many thoughts of winning the championship. Even Feng Luohan, upon witnessing the fight between Zhang Yao and Lu Xiaojia, realized that he would not be Zhang Yao's match. At this moment, many people only thought about fighting as much as possible against other sword cultivators before losing, eventually losing to Zhang Yao, who they could not overcome. In the Spirit Sea Realm's later stage sword fighting zone, as Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei flew towards other sword cultivators, many even bowed respectfully to Zhang Yao from afar, avoiding combat with her and starting fights with other sword cultivators instead. The Spirit Sea Realm's mid-stage sword fighting zone. Seeing Zhang Yao's Void Heaven sword chi number skyrocket, Yi Chen also smiled. Afterward, Yi Chen's figure moved, and he shot off towards other sword cultivators. In the Void Heaven Sword Valley, beside the 3 sword-fighting areas, was a flowing sword river. All the sword cultivators who had been defeated and eliminated in the sword-fighting competition were now sitting cross-legged on huge leaves on the sword river. Above their heads in the void, the same magical lights permeated, illuminating the various scenes of sword fighting in the 3 areas and a Void Heaven sword ranking hanging high. When Zhang Yao fought Lu Xiaojia in the Sword River, the number of eliminated sword cultivators had reached over 6,000. Among them, Murong Qiqi, who had been defeated by Yi Chen, sat within the crowd. Seeing the battle between Zhang Yao and Lu Xiaojia, especially when Lu Xiaojia unleashed the deadly power of the metal-based Law Sword Seed, Murong Qiqi was startled. The girl had not expected that, aside from her and Yi Chen, another sword cultivator with the level of Law Sword Seed would appear. And once Lu Xiaojia was defeated, Murong Qiqi looked at Zhang Yao with eyes full of disbelief. She had not thought that Lu Xiaojia, who had unleashed the killing power of the Law Sword Seed, would be defeated by Zhang Yao. Murong Qiqi could feel that her combat strength was similar to Lu Xiaojia's. This meant that even if she had not been defeated by Yi Chen, she would have ended up losing to Zhang Yao in the end.
Yi Chen.
Zhang Yao. In this swordsmanship tournament, 2 prodigies have emerged. Both are definitely stronger than I. Murong Qiqi's eyes sparkled with light. Both of them, I heard, are newly recruited disciples of the Heavenly Sacred Palace. In the extreme north, within the Ice Snow Divine Palace, I had no rivals among the sword cultivators of the Spirit Sea Realm. Even against cultivators in the Spinning Dan realm, using all my techniques, I could fight against many of the strongest at the later stages. Yet coming to Middle Domain showed me that there are skies beyond our skies and people beyond our people. After I return to the extreme north this time, it seems I will need to seriously cultivate besides helping Yi Chen seek information on that Dekong Heavenly Saint. Murong Qiqi was deeply moved by Yi Chen and Zhang Yao. Other sword cultivators who had been defeated felt the same intense impact from Yi Chen and Zhang Yao's swordsmanship. In everyone's hearts surged a wave of admiration and a burning passion. The admiration was for the strength of Yi Chen and Zhang Yao, and the burning passion was because their swordsmanship had not reached its limit, and Yi Chen and Zhang Yao were their role models. They needed to continue cultivating. This deep feeling of admiration and fiery passion grew even more intense as the swordsmanship tournament continued, with more participants getting defeated and eliminated, plunging into the Sword River. Because the defeated could clearly see, within the Spirit Sea Realm's mid-stage sword fighting area, Yi Chen swept through everything undefeated, without a single sword cultivator capable of stopping his victorious march. In the entire mid-stage sword fighting area of the Spirit Sea Realm, as Murong Qiqi had been defeated, there was no one else who could be Yi Chen's match. Even as the tournament proceeded into its second day and the limits separating the mid-stage and early-stage Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting areas were opened, allowing the remaining sword cultivators from both areas to battle each other, the situation remained unchanged. Aside from 2 sword cultivators who pushed Yi Chen to once again unleash the killing power of Law Sword Seed resulting in their elimination, no one else posed a barrier to him. Yi Chen could eliminate these contenders even with high-level sword arrays. Yi Chen's twice-executed Law Sword Seed's killing force made those in the eliminated Sword River, who hadn't seen Yi Chen employ the Law Sword Seed techniques in the other 2 sword fighting areas, gasp in astonishment. Moreover, what shocked these sword cultivators was that many noticed towards the end, Yi Chen even began using many of the sword array techniques of those he had crossed swords with. Clearly, Yi Chen, while engaging with those sword cultivators, was not only winning Void Heaven Sword Chi but also learning the swordsmanship of various sword cultivators. Yi Chun, who had mastered the incredibly powerful Law Sword Seed technique, was not prideful or complacent, and kept learning relentlessly. Even lower-level sword array techniques than the Law Sword Seed did not escape his interest. He learned, pondered, and summarized them. Looking on, many sword cultivators in the eliminated Sword River fell silent. Many of them recalled that, within their own sex, they belonged to the absolute elite of sword cultivators. Yet when facing those whom they deemed inferior, they could hardly avoid looking down on them. Now, Yi Chun had taught them what it means to remain unhaunted by victory and always pursue continuous learning and growth. Perhaps it is because of this that Yi Chun has become so powerful, many thought to themselves. Throughout the early and mid-stage areas of the Spirit Sea Realm Swordsmanship Tournament, Yi Chun swept through, continuously accumulating Void Heaven Sword Chi. Meanwhile, Zhang Yao kept winning in the late-stage Spirit Sea Realm, victory after victory. Aside from a few like Lu Qingmei, Mo Bailing, and Fang Luohan who hadn't faced Zhang Yao, the rest were being continuously eliminated. The number of people in the eliminated Sword River kept increasing. The situation on the Void Heaven Sword ranking became clearer and clearer. Many understood that among the few most powerful contestants remained the eventual champion of the Spirit Sea Realm Swordsmanship Tournament. And among them, Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, who had already accumulated over 500 million strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi, were unquestionably the two hottest favorites to win the championship. As the swordsmanship tournament arrived at the late moments of the third day, when only 5 out of the 9,868 participating sword cultivators remained after a slew of eliminations, the final 5 finally flew together. These 5 individuals were Yi Chun, Zhang Yao, Lu Qingmei, Mo Bailing, and Fang Luohan. Now at the final moment, these 5 could no longer avoid battle and finally had to determine their respective standings. Chapter 336. The Final Challenge. When Yi Chun, Zhang Yao, Lu Qingmei, Mo Bailing, and Fang Luohan, the 5 of them, flew together, the eyes of all martial artists and sword cultivators both outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley and eliminated within the Sword River, converged upon them. At this time, these 5 were the last remaining top 5 contenders who had yet to be defeated in the Void Heaven Sword ranking. In the Void Heaven Sword ranking, Fang Luohan was ranked 5th. After capturing the Void Heaven Sword Chi from other sword cultivators, the amount of Void Heaven Sword Chi on him had reached over 80 million strands. Lu Qingmei was ranked 4th, and the quantity of her Void Heaven Sword Chi also exceeded 100 million strands, reaching over 130 million. Mo Bailing, surpassing both Fang Luohan and Lu Qingmei, was ranked 3rd. The sphere of Void Heaven Sword Chi around him had condensed a staggering amount of over 180 million strands, incredibly astonishing. Whether it was Fang Luohan, Lu Qingmei, or Mo Bailing, just the quantity of their Void Heaven Sword Chi alone was already unbelievable. However, when the final 5 stood together, all eyes became even more focused on the other 2, especially on Yi Chun and Zhang Yao. Because Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, who had defeated the highest number of sword cultivators, had quantities of Void Heaven Sword Chi that far exceeded the combined total of the other 3. Each of Yi Chun and Zhang Yao had over 500 million strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi surrounding them. Over 500 million strands. This simply signified that almost the majority of the Void Heaven Sword Chi from all participating Spirit Sea Realm sword cultivators in the Cultivation Conference had gathered upon these 2 individuals. Lu Qingmei had been by Zhang Yao's side all along and had grown accustomed to her astonishing Void Heaven Sword Chi. However, when Fang Luohan and Mo Bailing flew beside Yi Chun and Zhang Yao and witnessed the towering sphere of Void Heaven Sword Chi that spiraled thousands of feet high around them, they were rendered speechless in utter shock in comparison to their own. Although through the Void Heaven Sword ranking, they already knew the quantity of Yi Chun and Zhang Yao's Void Heaven Sword Chi, witnessing the scene of the spiraling sphere that soared thousands of feet high still left them deeply astonished. Zhang Yao. Yi Chun didn't bother with the 2 shocked individuals. After the 5 gathered together, he approached Zhang Yao directly. Observing the sphere of Void Heaven Sword Chi around the girl that resembled his own, Yi Chun nodded with a smile. Zhang Yao also returned a gentle smile and extended her hand to take hold of Yi Chen's palm. The 3 days of the sword fighting conference, just from the amount of Void Heaven Sword chi congealed around the two of them, it was evident that they had gained tremendously. Yi Chen. Lu Qingmei also looked at Yi Chen's surrounding Void Heaven Sword chi with a smile. Now that only the final 5 remain, how do you plan to proceed with the last battles? Lu Qingmei asked Yi Chen. The final battles? Yi Chen's eyes moved past Lu Qingmei, landing on Fang Luohan and Mo Bailing. In these 3 days, Yi Chen had defeated thousands of sword cultivators. He had learned hundreds, if not thousands, of fencing techniques, which greatly enhanced his knowledge. Not to mention the more than 500 million strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi he had amassed, as well as Yi Chen's mastery of Su Tian Wu Ji 2, and his insight into the newly cultivated 5 Law Sword Seeds during combat. Could be said that Yi Chen was now completely satisfied with his gains from the Cultivation Conference. Yi Chen was looking forward to the end of the 3-day period, when he could convert the surrounding Void Heaven Sword Chi into true Chi and make a breakthrough towards a higher realm to see just how far he could go. As for Fang Luohan and Mo Bailing in front of him, he didn't feel compelled to defeat them necessarily. After all, among the remaining 5, Yi Chen obviously would not engage with Zhang Yao to take her Void Heaven Sword Chi. Furthermore, Lu Qingmei had helped him and Zhang Yao in the square earlier, so Yi Chen wouldn't choose to battle Lu Qingmei either. So whether or not to engage Fang Luohan and Mo Bailing in battle was of no significant consequence. I'm quite content with what I've achieved so far. Whether or not to fight in the last battles is not an issue for me, said Yi Chen with a smile. While speaking, he turned to look at Mo Bailing and Fang Luohan. Of course, if someone wishes to fight with me, I won't refuse. Zhang Yao, standing beside Yi Chen, also nodded with a smile. My thoughts are the same as Yi Chen's. Both had already been selected to join the Heavenly Sacred Palace, so they did not have to worry about the reward of joining the Heavenly Sacred Palace for being the first on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Furthermore, with their significant gains from the event, they naturally would not deliberately compete for that last bit of Void Heaven Sword Chi anymore. What about the two of you? Lu Qingmei turned to Mo Bailing and Fang Luohan and asked. Fang Luohan was taken aback. He had long witnessed Zhang Yao's tactics and certainly knew he couldn't beat her. If Zhang Yao truly sought to defeat him, he would definitely be eliminated. Relieved upon hearing that Zhang Yao no longer had the intention to actively fight, Fang Luohan sighed in relief and said with a smile, I do not have the strength to vie for the first spot on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Whether I fight or not, it won't affect the overall outcome. If neither Yi Chen nor Zhang Yao come after my Void Heaven Sword Chi, I would count myself lucky. I certainly won't be the one to initiate a challenge. Fang Luohan expressed his stance. However, Mo Bailing next to him was struggling with his decision. The reason for his struggle was that Mo Bailing still harbored the thought of vying for the first place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. After all, the first place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking meant one could join the Heavenly Sacred Palace and become a disciple. Yi Chen and Zhang Yao might not care about this reward, but it was of utmost importance to Mo Bailing. After all, joining the Heavenly Sacred Palace would be of great help to his future cultivation, far more so than practicing in a third-tier sword sect. But Mo Bailing was afraid of losing to Yi Chen and Zhang Yao. After all, to vie for the first spot on the Void Heaven Sword ranking, he had to defeat at least one of them. Mo Bailing had heard that Zhang Yao had defeated Lu Xiaojia, who controlled the Law Sword Seed. He did not believe he had much chance of defeating her either. As for Yi Chen, although he had not witnessed Yi Chen's skills, the fact that Yi Chen still ranked first and had acquired over 500 million strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi meant he certainly had some tricks up his sleeve, something Mo Bailing refused to believe otherwise. Facing such opponents, Mo Bailing was, of course, afraid of losing. On one hand, there was the temptation of the opportunity to join the Heavenly Sacred Palace by obtaining the first spot on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. On the other, there was the fear of defeat.
Montag Bailing Strucklet Immenseli.
In the end, the temptation overcame his fear. I'll gamble. If I lose the challenge, I'll only have lost these strands of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Even without them, I'll still succeed in the rotating pill breakthrough in the future. But if I win, I get to seize even more Void Heaven Sword Chi. perhaps even winning the slot to enter the heavenly sacred palace. I know the power of my law sword seed. A battle with Zhang Yao might not be entirely out of the question, and as for Yi Chun, I'm surely able to fight him. He's only at the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm. Maybe he hasn't faced many strong opponents in the mid-stage and early-stage Spirit Sea realm of the sword-fighting area. I must fight. I must strive to claim the first place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Once Mo Biling had made up his mind, he looked up at the remaining 4 people. The sword-fighting tournament isn't over until the very last moment, and the rankings aren't finalized. I still want to fight, to continue striving for the top of the Void Heaven Sword ranking. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As he spoke, he waved his arm, and over 1,000 swords burst forth from him, embedding themselves into the ground. These are the weapons of the sword cultivators I've defeated. Whether they remain in my hands in the end depends on the outcome of the battles to come, Mo Biling said while looking directly at Fong Luohan. Fong, I lost to you in the competition among the 4 third-tier sword sects. For my first challenge, I chose you. Instead of challenging Yi Chun or Zhang Yao first, Mo Biling initiated a challenge towards Fong Luohan. Fong Luohan had not expected Mo Biling to dare to make a play for the first spot on the Void Heaven Sword ranking at the last moment, let alone challenge him first. Back then, I lost to him, and I've heard he's been in seclusion contemplating swordsmanship in the past few years. Could it be that he has made some gains? Fong Luohan pondered. However, Fong Luohan responded to the challenge without hesitation. If Brother Mo wishes to fight me, I certainly won't refuse. At this final moment of the sword-fighting tournament, facing a challenge invoked the pride of a sword cultivator. One should not, and would not, refuse. Boom! 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 After accepting the challenge, Fong Luohan and Mo Biling flew directly into the sky, standing opposite each other. I thought this sword-fighting tournament wouldn't see any more action after Yi Chun and Sister Zhang Yao refrained from fighting. It seems some are still not satisfied and want a battle, Lu Qingmei said with a slight smile, raising her head to look at Fong Luohan and Mo Biling. Yi Chun and Zhang Yao also smiled and shook their heads, then flew aside to watch the battle between the two. Chapter 337 Reverse Flow of Sword Qi. Outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, as Mo Biling and Fong Luohan were about to begin their sword fight, many martial artists' eyes lit up with excitement. Mo Biling and Fong Luohan were 2 of the 6 top contenders for the championship. Although overshadowed by the limelight of Yi Chun and Zhang Yao, the match between these 2 still garnered much attention. Moreover, Mo Biling and Fong Luohan had previously dueled, with Fong Luohan defeating Mo Biling, then ranked second among the top 3 grades of the Spirit Sea Sword cultivators, which earned him fame within the sword cultivators. Now that Mo Biling was challenging Fong Luohan, naturally, many wanted to know the outcome of their battle. Everyone was eager to know whether Fong Luohan could defeat Mo Biling again or if Mo Biling would get his revenge. But when Fong Luohan and Mo Biling actually began fighting, countless people were shocked to exclaim. Because the 2 who were expected to be evenly matched instead saw Mo Biling completely defeat Fong Luohan in just a moment after the real fight began. And the technique Mo Biling used to defeat Fong Luohan was none other than the Law Sword Seed. The sword technique that had previously astonished countless spectators when displayed by Morong Chichi, Yi Chun, and Lu Xiaojia. No one expected that Mo Biling, who had lost to Fong Luohan before, also possessed the high-level sword technique of Law Sword Seed. This Spirit Sea Realm sword fighting tournament unexpectedly had its 4th Law Sword Seed master appear. Such an occurrence was unprecedented in the history of the tournament. Moreover, many could see that Mo Biling's Law Sword Seed seemed slightly more powerful than Lu Xiaojia's Gold Series Law Sword Seed. It was then that everyone finally understood why Mo Biling took part in the duels and issued challenges. He too held such a trump card. Fong Luohan, defeated by Mo Biling, was eliminated in surprise. In the arena, the only undefeated were now Yi Chun, Zhang Yao, Lu Qingmei, and Mo Biling. After taking away Fong Luohan's Void Heaven Sword Qi and all the treasured swords from those sword cultivators he had defeated, Mo Biling was eliminated and directly turned his gaze towards Yi Chun. Having revealed his Law Sword Seed technique and settled his old score with Fong Luohan, Mo Biling's sole intention now was to defeat Yi Chun. First to defeat Yi Chun, seize the top place on the Void Heaven Sword ranking, and then see if Lu Qingmei and Zhang Yao would challenge him. Thinking this, Mo Biling directly called Yi Chun out. Seeing Mo Biling challenge Yi Chun, countless martial artists outside became excited. These martial artists knew that Yi Chun had already defeated a Law Sword Seed Master, Murong Chichi, and now another Law Sword Seed Master, Mo Biling, was challenging Yi Chun. Very soon, the second battle, Law Sword Seed versus Law Sword Seed, was about to unfold. Yi Chun's Law Sword Seed was more powerful than Murong Chichi's, and Mo Biling's Law Sword Seed was stronger than Lu Xiaojia's. With Murong Chichi and Lu Xiaojia's Law Sword Seed strengths being comparable, everyone wanted to know who would win between Yi Chun and Mo Biling in the end. The only one untroubled in the arena was Zhang Yao. Because after Mo Biling challenged Yi Chun, Zhang Yao received a transmission from Yi Chun, assuring her that defeating Mo Biling would be no problem at all. Of course, Zhang Yao believed Yi Chun's words. And when Yi Chun and Mo Biling flew high into the void and truly started to fight, countless people shouted in amazement. Because when Mo Biling made his move against Yi Chun, he didn't merely use the Law Sword Seed ability as he had against Fong Luohan, but directly unleashed two Law Sword Seed techniques in their full form: the Wood Series Law Sword Seed move and Earth Series Law Sword Seed move. Watching the green Law Sword shadows and brown Law Sword shadows fill the heavens, everyone realized why Mo Biling's Law Sword Seed was stronger than Lu Xiaojia's. He had comprehended two Law Sword Seed techniques, and what shocked countless people even more was that after Mo Biling used his two Law Sword Seed techniques, Yi Chun didn't hesitate and grabbed in the void, and 5 Law Sword Seed lights flashed forth in his hand. Yi Chun had actually unleashed all 5 series Law Sword Seeds at once. This of course made countless people scream. The 5 series Law Sword types represent the strongest comprehension within the category of Law Sword Seeds, indicating a strong affinity with the 5 major Void Heaven laws. Such an occurrence is as rare as a perfect 5 apertures rotating pill, extremely uncommon, one might say truly 1 in 100 million. Yi Chun's ability to use the 5 series Law Sword types implies that, should he step into the rotating pill realm, he is very likely to also create the most perfect and powerful 5 apertures rotating pill. During the mid-stage of the Spirit Sea realm, countless people had heard that Yi Chun had the power to battle the strongest in the rotating pill realm. If Yi Chun steps into the rotating pill realm and achieves the perfect rotating pill, not to mention being the strongest in the rotating pill realm, even unbeatable Yi Chun could sweep through them, and might even be able to contend with early Heavenly Saint powerhouses. Warriors know that true fighters do not show all their cards during a fight, just like Yi Chun battling Mo Biling, using the power of 3 Law Sword Seeds to defeat Mo Biling. Now, Yi Chun, without any hesitation, took out all the killing power of the 5 series Law Sword types, which definitely indicated that Yi Chun had other trump cards to use. He wanted to swiftly deal with Mo Biling. These people weren't wrong. Yi Chun's truly powerful trump card, the one that allowed him to battle against the strongest in the late rotating pill realm with Spirit Sea realm strength, was his mix Yuan True Qi and the methods of the 5 divine bloodlines. And at that moment, when Mo Biling unleashed the killing power of 2 Law Sword Seeds, Yi Chun felt that within his body, the 5 Law Sword Seeds were drawn by Void Heaven's Sword Valley and yearned to burst forth. Yi Chun also felt that if he used the methods of the 5 Law Sword Seeds, it would trigger an incredible change in Void Heaven's Sword Valley, a change that might lead to a major breakthrough for his 5 divine bloodlines. With this in mind, of course Yi Chun would not hesitate to use all 5 Law Sword Seeds methods right away. Seeing Yi Chun's hands shimmer with the light of the metal, wood, water, fire, and earth Law Sword types, not only did countless warriors outside the field scream, even Zhang Yao beside him was somewhat startled, while Lu Qingmei's mouth opened wide in amazement, unable to speak. And in the Sword River of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, where over 9,000 eliminated sword cultivators were Murong Chichi, Xiaofeng, Lu Xiaojia, Fong Luohan, and others' eyes bulged with astonishment. As for Mo Biling, facing Yi Chun, he was the most shocked. Mo Biling originally thought that his hidden law sword seed methods could defeat Yi Chun and eventually challenge Zhang Yao, but he never expected Yi Chun to actually master the 5 law sword seeds. With only 2 law sword seeds of his own, facing Yi Chun's 5 law sword seeds and still thinking about defeating Yi Chun was simply a fool's dream.
Boom! Boom! Boom!
In the midst of Mo Biling's great shock, the killing force of the 2 law sword seeds he had released into the void shattered under the impact of Yi Chen's 5 law sword seeds' power, all of them breaking apart. Yi Chen's 5 law sword seeds' power merely touched Mo Biling lightly, and the void heaven sword chi outside Mo Biling's body immediately burst forth towards Yi Chen. And Mo Biling was directly eliminated. The eliminated Mo Biling left behind all the treasured swords he had won, along with his own treasured sword, and all the void heaven sword chi he had seized, including half of his own, after which he was transported into the sword river of the void heaven sword valley. Yi Chen, however, did not care about the treasured swords and the surging void heaven sword chi left by Mo Biling, but looked directly down at the vast void heaven sword valley and towards the sword pits that had become quiet since the beginning of the sword fight. To everyone's surprise, the previously tranquil sword pits suddenly erupted with tremendous 5-colored void heaven sword chi, as Yi Chen used the 5 law sword seeds' power to defeat Mo Biling. Moreover, the quantity of void heaven sword chi erupting from the sword pits this time seemed to be several times more than what countless sword cultivators had first gathered in the void heaven sword valley, forming void heaven sword chi. A large part of this void heaven sword chi surged toward Yi Chen, and the quantity of void heaven sword chi around Yi Chen skyrocketed directly from over 700 million after defeating Mo Biling to 800 million, 900 million, charging crazily toward 1 billion. A smaller part of the void heaven sword chi also surged towards Zhang Yao beside Yi Chen, pouring into her as well. Even Lu Qingmei, who was still in shock from Yi Chen's 5 law sword seeds methods and had not yet recovered, received a considerable amount of the surging void heaven sword chi. Looking at this, it was unmistakably the great blessing from Void Heaven Sword Valley mentioned earlier by Snow Crystal Taoist, the second wave of Void Heaven Sword Chi surging and offering another opportunity for Sword Chi to infuse the body. But at this moment, Snow Crystal Taoist and the heavenly saints outside Void Heaven Sword Valley were equally astonished. They knew there was a possibility for a second infusion of Sword Chi in Void Heaven Sword Valley, but that had only occurred 3 times in the thousands of years of sword fighting conferences. And each of those 3 times happened only after all other sword cultivators were eliminated, with just the number 1 ranked sword cultivator remaining, who had more than 800 million stocks of Void Heaven Sword Chi, before it was triggered. Furthermore, this second Sword Chi infusion only went to the strongest sword cultivator, and the amount of Void Heaven Sword Chi was not as much as the first time. Now, Yi Chen was able to trigger a second surge of Void Heaven Sword Chi that far exceeded the first in quantity, and even allowed the 3 remaining in the Void Heaven Sword Valley sword fighting area to infuse sword chi simultaneously. This of course greatly surprised the hosts of the sword fighting conference and the heavenly saints. Chapter 338. The hosts of the sword fighting tournament and the heavenly saints were astonished beyond measure. Meanwhile, the countless martial artists outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley and those eliminated in the sword river of the tournament couldn't help but scream out loud when they saw Yi Chen, after defeating Mo Biling, actually caused the Void Heaven Sword Chi to surge forth once again. With the second dose of Sword Chi enveloping him, plus the Sword Chi light sphere they already possessed, no one could predict what astonishing gains Yi Chen and his 2 companions would have by the end, after completely solidifying the Void Heaven Sword Chi and transforming it into true Chi to absorb into their bodies. Yi Chen paid no attention to the shock and screams of countless people. At this moment, inside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, Yi Chen, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei, after realizing the great opportunity brought by the second condensation of Sword Chi, all regulated their breath and spirit. They sat cross-legged in the void, focusing all their mind and spirit on the condensation of Void Heaven Sword Chi. Thus, the Sword Chi light spheres around Yi Chen, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei expanded continuously, rising upwards like billowing smoke. Lu Qingmei was slightly better off. The original Sword Chi light sphere around her was only slightly more than 130 million strands, and the second wave of Sword Chi that flowed towards her was less, so the count of Sword Chi around her was just moving towards 200 million strands. But at this moment, the amount of void heaven sword qi around Yichun and Zhang Yao had reached an unbelievably massive number. Zhang Yao's void heaven sword qi had rapidly increased from more than 500 million strands to 600 million strands, 700 million strands, 800 million strands, and Yi Chen's void heaven sword qi had actually stepped into the range of over 1 billion strands. Over 1 billion strands of void heaven sword qi. If all of it were turned into true qi spiritual fluid, it would be enough to completely fill the qi sea of someone in the spirit sea realm. Perhaps even a martial artist in the more powerful rotating pill realm could attempt a full breakthrough if they truly absorbed all the true qi. Although it's said that there's a huge bottleneck for martial artists moving from the spirit sea realm to the early stages of the rotating pill realm. And moving from the early to the middle and later stages of the rotating pill realm involves even more significant barriers, related to the understanding of the 5 major heavenly void laws, which does not allow for direct breakthroughs. In the past, the champions of the Spirit Sea realm in the sword fighting tournament usually couldn't absorb it fully. More often than not, most of the true qi they gathered would eventually dissipate away. However, everyone had seen the talents of Yichun and Zhang Yao. These two were beings capable of battling the strongest in the later stages of the rotating pill realm with just the strength of the Spirit Sea realm. Such level of powerhouses should definitely not be measured by common standards. Most likely, they wouldn't waste the void heaven sword qi enveloping them. There must be methods for them to utilize these tremendous gains to the fullest. Thinking this, everyone's breath hitched. Everyone was waiting to see what gains Yi Chen, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei would have after the full completion of sword qi condensation and the 3 days allowed for transforming void heaven sword qi into true qi had passed.
Boom! Boom! Boom!
As countless people watched and waited, the sword qi light spheres around Yichun and Zhang Yao continued to grow. And when Yi Chen's count of void heaven sword qi explosively increased to over 1.9 billion strands, and Zhang Yao's to over 1.3 billion strands, even Lu Qingmei's count surpassed 300 million strands. Their second condensation of sword qi finally concluded. Before Yichun and the others, along with the countless martial artists focused on them, could take a deep breath, everyone realized that the real 3 days of the sword fighting event had finally come to an end. The moment for the transformation of void heaven sword qi into true qi had truly arrived.
Bang! Bang!
Bang! The instant this moment occurred, the eliminated sword cultivators in the sword river of the void heaven sword valley saw the remaining half of their sword qi light spheres outside their bodies burst open. The rolling void heaven sword qi instantly became wildly active around them and then transformed into verdant true qi, swirling into their bodies. If this was happening to those eliminated sword cultivators, Yichun, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei were no exception. The instant when void heaven sword qi could be utilized, over 1.9 billion strands of it exploded and surged around Yichun. In the end, it transformed into a cloud of astonishing true qi that hovered above Yi Chen's head, taking the form of an inverted vortex, rolling into his body. The same happened to Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei. Sensing the vast and immense true qi entering their bodies, Yi Chen sent a sound transmission to Zhang Yao and Lu Qingmei. Then, he fully entered the state of true qi cultivation and the process of breaking through his realm. Not long after Yi Chen, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei entered the state of true qi cultivation, many sword cultivators who had been eliminated from the sword river gradually came out of their state of cultivating sword qi. The amount of true qi remaining outside their bodies wasn't much. Absorbing these bits of true qi did not take too much time. And after half an hour had passed, even Lu Xiaojia, among those eliminated sword cultivators who had the most remaining void heaven sword qi, had completed their true qi cultivation. Finally, all the sword cultivators who had completed their cultivation of true qi were transferred out of the void heaven sword valley. However, at this moment, within the void heaven sword valley, Yichun, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei were still cultivating true qi. All eyes, not only those of the spectators who had been watching earlier but also those of the recently eliminated sword cultivators such as Murong Qiqi, Lu Xiaojia, Mo Bailing, and others, were all fixed on the last 3 remaining in the void heaven sword valley, focused on Yichun, Zhang Yao, and Lu Qingmei. After a long while, Lu Qingmei had dissipated more than 2 billion strands of the more than 3 billion strands of true qi she had absorbed, but with the tens of millions she had successfully retained, she directly triggered the descent of 5 great heavenly void laws. She condensed the 4 apertures rotating pill, stepping from the late phase of the spirit sea realm into the rotating pill realm, and the countless watching martial artists outside the void heaven sword valley exclaimed in amazement. 4 apertures rotating pill. In the spirit sea realm sword fighting tournament, they had actually witnessed someone from the spirit sea stepping into the rotating pill and achieving the incredibly powerful 4 apertures rotating pill. And this person was merely Lu Qingmei, who was ranked 3rd among the last 3.
Boom.
After stepping into the rotating pill, Lu Qingmei was directly repelled from the Void Heaven Sword Valley. After sensing the changes in her body following the advancement, Lu Qingmei joined everyone else in looking towards the Void Heaven Sword Valley, focusing on the last 2 remaining, Yichun and Zhang Yao. Going from the late phase of the Spirit Sea to the rotating pill, and triggering the 5 great heavenly void laws under the massive infusion of true qi, did not take very long, whether successful or not. It usually could be completed in half a day. After Lu Qingmei completed her impact on the rotating pill, everyone thought that Yichun and Zhang Yao would also finish their cultivation quickly. However, after waiting for a whole day, Yichun and Zhang Yao, who were seated cross-legged in the void of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, showed no sign of finishing their cultivation. Furthermore, there was no sign of the rolling true qi rushing into their bodies dissipating at all. This surprised many martial artists and made Elder Shao Supreme Elder and Mu Qingqing, among others, pay extremely close attention to Yichun and Zhang Yao. Everyone knew that the 2 of them were probably not just impacting their realm. There must be another breakthrough. And when 2 whole days had passed with still no movement from Yichun and Zhang Yao, many martial artists couldn't help but stand up. When the wait reached 3 days, and the appointed time for the end of the Spirit Sea Realm Sword Fighting Tournament had come and gone, and the day of the second grand event Hidden Dragon List Tournament had arrived, and Yichun and Zhang Yao still hadn't completed their cultivation, it was already a great surprise to everyone. In the end, it was Elder Shao Supreme Elder and several heavenly saints who ordered the start of the Hidden Dragon List Tournament on another mountain peak next to Immeasurable Peak. After many people rushed to watch the Hidden Dragon List Tournament, the crowd outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley diminished somewhat. However, even though many had gone to watch the Hidden Dragon List Tournament, many still paid attention to Yichun and Zhang Yao from time to time, and people like Mu Qingqing, who were extremely attentive to Yichun and Zhang Yao, still stayed outside the Void Heaven Sword Valley, waiting for Yichun and Zhang Yao to complete their cultivation. For days, 5 days, 6 days, as time passed day by day, countless people were paying attention to Yichun and Zhang Yao, and at the same time, many were also focused on the ongoing Hidden Dragon List Tournament, which was in full swing. But what others didn't know was that despite their outward appearance of utter calmness, just sitting quietly in the void of the Void Heaven Sword Valley, tremendous changes were occurring inside both Yichun and Zhang Yao. Inside Zhang Yao, within the Qi Sea, a divine and extraordinary ice-blue phoenix phantom was slowly condensing, and it was the numerous strands of true qi entering her body that were making this phoenix phantom materialize. Turning to look at Yichun's Qi Sea, one could see even more dramatic changes. His Qi Sea had already undergone another transformation from the mid-phase of the Spirit Sea realm, breaking through to the late phase. At this moment, Yichun had not stopped. The Qi Sea that had advanced to the late phase of the Spirit Sea was filled with rolling black primordial true Qi spiritual fluid, fierce enough to be considered on par with late-stage rotating pill realm powerhouses, yet showing no sign of cessation, continuing to impact towards the rotating pill realm. In this course of impact, the 5 great divine bloods floating above Yichun's Qi Sea were being utilized more and more, already surpassing 2/3, 3/4, constantly moving towards full utilization. It seemed that Yichun was not only impacting the rotating pill realm but also aimed to complete the second chapter, primordial chapter of the primordial star scripture in one effort, to fully utilize all 5 great divine bloods, drip them into the Qi Sea, and break through to the even more powerful and mysterious third chapter of the primordial star scripture. Chapter 339 Star Scripture Taiyuan Chapter. The primordial star scripture is divided into 7 chapters, hidden within the 7 levels of the star's divine tower. Yichun stepped into the first level and obtained the first chapter of the primordial star scripture, the Gang Yuan chapter. After cultivating the Gang Yuan chapter to completion, Yichun successfully entered the second level of the star's divine tower, and acquired an even more powerful primordial chapter. The three major cultivation steps of the primordial chapter involve cultivating the primordial true liquid, cultivating the 5 elements physique great divine powers, and infusing the 5 great divine bloods into the true liquid. Now, Yi Chen had finally reached the last step. As the true qi transformed from the void heaven sword qi entered Yi Chen's qi si, the amount of primordial true liquid in Yi Chen's qi si kept increasing, and he called upon more and more of the 5 great divine bloods. Once all of the 5 great divine bloods were called upon and dripped into the primordial true liquid, Yi Chen would be able to completely cultivate the second chapter of the primordial star scripture, the primordial chapter, and progress to the third level of the star's divine tower to obtain the third chapter of the primordial star scripture. The primordial star scripture once described the power of the 7 cultivation techniques, stating that cultivating up to the 4th chapter would be enough to dominate an entire world. The most formidable existences in the barbaric wilderness continent where Yi Chen resided are at the later stages of the heavenly saint realm. To say that cultivating to the 4th chapter would enable one to dominate the barbaric wilderness continent meant that once Yi Chen cultivated to the 4th chapter, he would definitely be able to sweep through the later stages of the heavenly saint realm. If he could sweep through the later stages of the heavenly saint realm just by reaching the 4th chapter, it was very likely that the preceding chapter, the 3rd chapter, could grant Yi Chen the true strength to do battle with the powerhouses of the heavenly saint realm. It should be known that the 2nd chapter of the primordial star scripture, the primordial chapter, with its primordial true liquid and 5 elements physique great divine powers, enabled Yi Chen to battle rotating pills even at the spirit sea realm. If Yi Chen stepped into the 3rd chapter of the star scripture, it wasn't impossible for him to possess the strength to do battle with even more powerful beings of the heavenly saint realm. Thinking of this, Yi Chen was of course immensely excited. Now, with troubles brewing in the southern territory and the western wilderness, and a great battle approaching, Yi Chen was eager to increase his strength. If he truly gained the strength to challenge those of the heavenly saint realm, then Yi Chen would possess boundless confidence, and when the great battle between the southern territory and the western wilderness truly erupted, he would be able to contribute his real strength to the southern territory. Aim for the 3rd chapter. Let's see just how powerful and profound the 3rd chapter will be. With immense excitement, Yi Chen focused all his mind and spirit on refining the qi into liquid, turning all the true qi transformed from the void heaven sword qi into primordial true liquid, and launched the final assault towards the 3rd chapter of the primordial star scripture.
Boom! Boom! Boom!
Billions of strands of void heaven sword qi outside of Yi Chen's body crazily transformed into true qi and flew into his qi si. Thump! 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 Every strand of true qi that entered Yi Chen's qi si finally turned into black primordial true liquid and dripped into the vast ocean of true liquid in the qi si. And as the ocean of true liquid surged, the 5 droplets of divine blood suspended above the ocean started becoming increasingly radiant. On the 9th day of Yi Chen's endeavor to break through his current realm, he had fully refined more than 8 billion strands of true qi from the void heaven sword qi. And at this moment, the primordial true liquid within Yi Chen finally reached the true quantity needed to summon the entire might of the 5 great divine bloods. When this moment arrived, the primordial true liquid inside Yi Chen's body crazily swirled towards the 5 great divine bloods above it, towards the azure dragon divine blood, white tiger divine blood, vermilion bird divine blood, black tortoise divine blood, and Qilin divine blood. Whoosh! 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 As the boundless primordial true liquid surged towards the 5 great divine bloods, the 5 droplets of divine blood finally, for the first time, shone brightly all together. At the moment they all shone brightly, Yi Chen reversed his focus and, following the method for mobilizing the 5 great divine bloods, directed it toward the droplets. Yi Chen was about to directly drop all 5 great divine bloods into the vast ocean of primordial true liquid below.
Bang! Bang!
Bang!
Bang! Bang!
Under Yi Chen's manipulation, 5 divine beast phantasms emitting heavenward roars emerged from the 5 great divine bloods. They were the phantasms of the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, black tortoise, and Qilin divine beasts. In the midst of the heavenward roars of the 5 divine beast phantasms, they, along with the 5 droplets of divine blood, finally completely dropped into the vast ocean of primordial true liquid in Yi Chen's Qi Sea. At the moment when those 5 drops of divine blood dripped into the ocean of the primordial true liquid, the lights of the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, flashed, and Yi Chen felt his entire true Qi Sea, the endless primordial true liquid, all beginning to shine through. This luminous glow even illuminated all of Yi Chen's essence, qi, and spirit, shining upon his mind, bones, cells, blood. Everything started to become thoroughly clear. Within this thorough clarity, Yi Chen's entire body emanated an inexplicable divine light. Just at that moment, boom, a loud bang, floating in the middle of Yi Chen's Qi Sea, like the sea-calming divine needle. The star's tower finally attracted Yi Chen's mind and spirit for the 3rd time, directly absorbing Yi Chen's mind and spirit, which was emanating an inexplicable divine light, completely into the tower. 3rd layer of the star's tower. This time, Yi Chen entered right into the 3rd layer of the star's tower. Yi Chen finally had the chance to obtain the 3rd chapter of the primordial star scripture. In the 1st layer of the star's tower, Yi Chen had seen 5 fire altars, which contained the 5 layers of the cultivation technique of the 1st chapter, the Gang Yuan chapter. In the 2nd layer of the star's tower, Yi Chen saw 5 fist-sized drops of divine blood, which helped him cultivate the 5 great divine bloods of the 2nd chapter, the primordial chapter. Now, as Yi Chen stepped into the 3rd layer, he didn't see anything else but a mist flickering like stars throughout the whole 3rd layer. Starry fog. What is this? As Yi Chen's mind and spirit were observing this starry fog, the mist, flashing with endless starlight, came shining toward Yi Chen's mind and spirit. Under this divine and marvelous illumination, countless spell formulas were transmitted into Yi Chen's mind and spirit at the same time. After Yi Chen's mind and spirit looked into these numerous spell formulas, he finally understood what these spells represented. These spells turned out to be beyond the Gang Yuan chapter and primordial chapter, the 3rd chapter of the ancient primordial star scripture, the Taiyuan chapter. Star scripture, Taiyuan chapter. Yi Chen's mind and spirit throbbed wildly. Just by hearing this name, Yi Chen felt an inexplicable sense of divine wonder enveloping his entire mind and spirit. Yi Chen couldn't help but look closely at this Taiyuan chapter. The more he looked, the more excited Yi Chen's mind and spirit became, and the more incredible it seemed. The Taiyuan chapter starts off with Taiyuan chapter, the 3rd chapter of the ancient primordial star scripture, the truly powerful one. The Gang Yuan chapter and primordial chapter are the 2 foundational chapters of the primordial star scripture. But stepping into the Taiyuan chapter is to officially enter the chapters of power of the primordial star scripture. This chapter's cultivation technique not only includes internal skills cultivation, but also contains external skills and divine arts. Below, there is a detailed explanation of the Taiyuan chapter left by the ZG Star Lord, who created the primordial star scripture. This Taiyuan chapter is the result of me roaming through countless worlds, summarizing numerous methods of cultivation from these worlds to finally form this powerful chapter. Upon entering this chapter, the cultivation of internal skills is for cultivating the Taiyuan divine pilled. The practice of external skills, on the other hand, is for cultivating the 5 great divine arts. After the cultivation of both internal and external skills is completed, one can directly step into the 4th chapter of the primordial star scripture and truly step into the power to dominate a world. Chapter 340, Divine Pill, Divine Arts. Having truly stepped into the realms of power that dominate a world. ZG Star Lord's words sent Yi Chen's mind and spirit soaring with excitement. Although he had long known that the primordial star scripture was formidable, and that the 3rd chapter, Taiyuan chapter, would be stronger than the previous 2, the explanation of the combat power related to the 3rd chapter still made Yi Chen uncontrollably excited. This 3rd chapter cultivates internal skills and external skills separately. Let's take a good look at how exactly these internal skills and external skills are cultivated. Yi Chun suppressed his excitement and continued to read the script of the Taiyuan chapter. The script read, "The Taiyuan divine pill, cultivated in internal skills, is conceived using the primordial true liquid and 5 great divine bloods as a foundation, in combination with the unique starry fog of the 3rd floor of the Starlight Tower. This method of cultivation, like many worlds that cultivate rotating pills, golden cores, and primordial pills, involves transforming true qi spiritual fluid from a liquid state to a solid-state divine pill. However, the Taiyuan divine pill is far more powerful than the rotating pill, golden core, and primordial pill, because its cultivation consists of 3 major steps. The first step is to cultivate a rotating pill, or a golden core, or primordial pill, according to the cultivation methods of the world you are in. The second step is to cultivate from one rotating pill to countless rotating pills. According to the internal skills cultivation in the Taiyuan chapter, if one truly brings the second step to great accomplishment, one can cultivate from one rotating pill to 999 equally powerful rotating pills, reaching the state of extreme realm dispersion. The third step is then to unify these extreme realm dispersed rotating pills into one, letting all 999 rotating pills undergo extreme realm fusion into a single, even more powerful divine pill, which is called Taiyuan divine pill.
Boom.
The mere explanation of the cultivation of the Taiyuan divine pill astounded Yi Chun. My heavens, the first step of this Taiyuan divine pill, the cultivation of the rotating pill, is the same as the cultivation methods of the barbaric wilderness continent, which is not surprising. But the subsequent second and third steps are terrifying. In the second step, one actually cultivates 999 of the same rotating pills from a single one. Yi Chun had never heard of anyone in the barbaric wilderness continent possessing 999 rotating pills. Does this not mean that merely by completing the second step, not to mention the original rotating pill being immensely powerful, the combat power gained from the sheer number of rotating pills would make one nearly 1,000 times more powerful than others? It was a method of cultivation Yi Chun had never before heard of. And looking at the third step, the so-called extreme realm fusion, was even more astonishing for Yi Chun, as these 999 rotating pills could actually be fused together to form a single unique divine pill. This was not merely a simple fusion, according to the explanation provided in the Taiyuan chapter. By truly completing this third step, the entire Taiyuan divine pill would manifest incredible grand powers, with a genuine combat power many times greater than that of the combined power of 999 rotating pills. By that time, this internal skills cultivation would truly have reached the foundation necessary to impact the 4th chapter of the primordial star scripture. The internal skills cultivation in the Taiyuan chapter had already left Yi Chun in awe, and as his gaze passed over the endless spells for the internal skills cultivation, he followed with looking into the external skills cultivation. The external skills cultivation in the Taiyuan chapter consists of cultivating the 5 great divine arts. These 5 great divine arts, which I have summarized from countless continents that mainly cultivate true qi, are most suitable for the 5 elements secret method, and are related to the 5 great divine arts concerning the gold, wood, water, fire, earth, heavenly void laws. The 5 great divine arts are, respectively, the gold attribute divine art, golden light divine slash; the wood attribute divine art, wood emperor stacking skill; the water attribute divine art, heavenly origin divine water; the fire attribute divine art, heaven devouring true fire; and the earth attribute divine art, earth returning to origin art. The prowess of the 5 great divine arts is related to the internal skills cultivation of Taiyuan divine pill. The stronger the internal skills cultivation, the more powerful the external skills. At the same time, the 5 great divine arts are also related to the comprehension of the 5 heavenly void laws. The deeper the understanding of these laws, the more formidable the 5 great divine arts become. The most precious are these 5 great external skills divine arts that can be combined with internal skills. Once you possess these 5 divine arts, all of the 5 elements secret treasures related to the 5 major heavenly void laws throughout the whole world can be melted into the Taiyuan divine pill, enhancing the power of both internal and external skills. Take the fire attribute divine art, heaven devouring true fire, for example. This divine art can devour all heaven and earth true fires, integrating the power of endless true fire into the heaven-devouring true fire for combat purposes. Similarly, the water attribute divine art, heavenly origin divine water, can also fuse all the power of the heaven and earth true water. When the cultivation of the 5 great external skills divine arts reaches great accomplishment, it will achieve the most powerful attack power of the 5 major heavenly void laws. It even greatly aids in comprehending the space law that is connected to the 5 major heavenly void laws. One could say that the Taiyuan divine pill and the 5 great divine arts were specially created for the cultivation of the 5 great heavenly void laws, constituting the most powerful practice for cultivating these laws. Heaven. Yi-chun was already astoundingly surprised by the internal skills cultivation of the Taiyuan divine pill, and now the external skills cultivation of the 5 great divine arts made him feel even more incredulous. Golden light divine slash, wood emperor stacking skill, heavenly origin divine water, heaven devouring true fire, earth returning to origin art. Just the names of these 5 great divine arts alone made Yi-chun feel their mystery and immense strength. What the Taiyuan chapter mentioned about these divine arts being able to melt all of the 5 elements' secret treasures related to the 5 major heavenly void laws of the entire world truly shook Yi-chun to the core. As for true fire, Yi-chun was extremely familiar. He knew that even the weakest true fire reached the power level of heaven-grade cultivation techniques, and powerful true fire could even burn to death the cultivators in the heavenly saint realm. The fire attribute divine art, heaven-devouring true fire, could actually devour all heaven and earth true fire, which of course left Yi-chun in incredible disbelief. Yi-chun felt that if this divine art of his were to devour truly powerful true fire, just by unleashing heaven-devouring true fire, he could burn to death countless cultivators of the heavenly saint realm. Thinking of this, Yi-chun already had the idea to adventure across the entire barbaric wilderness continent, and even across all 33 continents, to find countless true fires and devour them. If he really did find several extremely powerful true fires, then even if there was a great war between the southern territory and the western wilderness, facing the heavenly saints of the 10 great demon sects of the western wilderness, what would he have to fear? By then, if those demon sect heavenly saints truly dared to massacre the southern territory, then his true fire would burn these heavenly saints, letting them truly understand the strength of the southern territory. It wasn't just the heaven-devouring true fire, but also the heavenly origin divine water and the wood emperor stacking skill. The 5 great divine arts, along with the internal skills cultivation of the Taiyuan divine pill, truly provided Yi-chun with a strong foundation. Seeing the cultivation methods for these internal and external skills, Yi-chun finally understood why the primordial star scripture said that this 3rd chapter entered the truly powerful realm. If this isn't powerful, what is? Yi-chun was confident that once he completely mastered the internal and external skills of this Taiyuan chapter, he wouldn't even fear the later existence in the heavenly saint realm of the barbaric wilderness continent. By then, not only would he be able to challenge the 4th chapter of the primordial star scripture, but he would also possess the foundation to transcend the lower realm of the barbaric wilderness continent and venture into the more mysterious upper realm, the minor spirit realm, to clash with even more powerful void sky true gods.